Captain's Log, June 2nd, 2836. After 27 years of war between the Degen Coomers and the Sainthood Slayers, a new hope arises. As the battlefield lay weaponized, locked and loaded for destruction, negotiations for a peace treaty are in transition. The moderator has arrived at Station 42. Can this war be ended? Will the Coomers and Slayers find a middle ground?
Abort mission. I repeat, abort mission. Negotiation failure. Abort mission.
Heavy boobies, 6+, low orbit, over grid 15-2.
No joy, Yashinman.
Then go to your window and look up their biggest fracking asteroid.
Copy, Yashinman. Still blind. Got some kind of system-wide crash in the defense grid.
They're on track or something right goddamn now, because we got Boku inbound, and they're not carrying flour.
Wait one, Yashinman.
We don't have flour.
And good. Oh, see, I'm missing one. There it goes. I'm just going here. We're going to do this way. My apologies, everyone. It was media tech issue all about crazy backstage. I don't know what's going on, but we're just going to leave it there like that. Okay. I am Sarah the Raging Tomato here, bringing to you live a Moderator Monday. Don't be confused. It is Thursday night, but this is just the series. This evening, I have Ken Harbro, Not So Eurudite, made by Jim Bob and Jake from Rattlesnake TV, here bringing to you another debate questioning, is feminism good for society? Ken, why don't you go ahead and kick it off with your opening statement?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Good to be here. Looking forward to a spirited conversation. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Ken Harbaugh, former Navy pilot and a combat recon mission commander. Since leaving the Navy, I've led a disaster relief organization, deployed to disaster and conflict zones around the world, most recently Ukraine, where I'm headed back in a few weeks. And in every one of those situations, from flying missions off of North Korea to being at the front in Ukraine, I have worked alongside women who I would trust my life with, who I did trust my life with. And my friends on the opposing side arguing against feminism are probably going to try to convince you that feminism is about lowering standards, among other things. It's not. Trust me, at times my life depended on those standards being upheld, and they were. Feminism is about giving a society the chance to achieve its full promise by unleashing the potential of everyone, men and women alike. Feminism is about opportunities. I guarantee you that the other thing the opposing side is going to do is cherry pick outlier data points. They'll do this to argue that the goal of feminism is to erase distinctions. And they'll try to convince you that a handful of ridiculous examples describe feminism writ large. It's an old debating trick, and it's not going to work, because feminism is about creating opportunities for the best contributions to be made to society. And that makes us better. It makes us stronger across every conceivable metric: economic growth, innovation, medical advancements. this approach towards fairness has made life better. And I could cite study after study from the OECD to the World Bank to McKinsey showing that in every society where feminism prevails, productivity increases, institutions are strengthened, but you don't have to believe the researchers, the experts, just trust your own intuition. Think about societies that do not live up to the promise of feminism. I have been to these places. I have seen firsthand what happens when those who want to tear down and lie about feminism actually win the argument. And believe me, you don't want to live there. I've been to Afghanistan. I've flown missions against Iran. That is where the other side's argument leads. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Kyla, to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ken did a pretty fantastic job. He's spitting, as one might say. I mean, my answer is pretty simple. Is feminism good for society? Yes. I think it's important that you separate out feminism from feminists. I think there will be lots of things where we might argue feminism went too far or feminists themselves have erred. And I'm just kind of happy to bite all those bullets. But when you look at like a broad societal brush of what feminism does, if feminism, which operationally I would work off of feminism saying it's a philosophy of empowering women, right? I think feminism is the morally right thing to do. I think it's good for innovation. I think it's good for productivity and the GDP. And I think those things lead to a better flourishing society. So yes, I am for feminism.
Thank you. Jim Bob, to you. You're muted, Jim Bob.
The question is feminism good for society? To me, that's like asking if mold is good for a house. To answer this question, whether or not feminism is good for society, we should first establish what it actually is. Feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of equality of the sexes. Without the flowery language, feminism is a movement away from patriarchy. Simply put, the question becomes, is the movement away from patriarchy good for society? I would say no. So what is good for society? Well, let's just keep some basic bullet points here. So my argument is that traditional families are good for society, not only good, but they're necessary, a necessary component for a flourishing society. Law and order, those are not only good for society, but they're necessary for society. Order is not only good, but any society you point to, it has some feature of order and law. Order assumes both hierarchy and force. I want you to remember that throughout the debate here. The third, and perhaps one of the more important bullet points, is duties and obligations. I would argue a society that has duties and obligations is better. It's a better society because they have duties and obligations. Any ordered system with people, there are duties and obligations. If we look at a company, for instance, it's structured with a hierarchy and everyone in the company has a duty and obligation. This is good for the company. The same way this is good for the company, this is good for society. However, feminism has no duties and obligations. What feminism has is a series of grievances and demands of which no collective of women could actualize. So instead, feminism relies wholly on men. Feminism is basically a live action role-playing game. Now let's see if feminism supports any of these things. Again, traditional families, law and order, duties and obligations. Does feminism support traditional families? No. Predominant messaging from feminism, not just feminists, feminism opposes the traditional family structure. It calls single motherhood empowering. It says having children hinders your potential. Its messaging says that killing your offspring in the womb is an act of liberation. Feminism does not produce positive messaging for motherhood. It produces negative messaging for motherhood. Now, the second bullet point, does feminism support order in society? No, feminism assumes in its very definition that men and women are interchangeable. They are not. Its messaging is anti-patriarchy. Feminism argues for equal rights and privileges between men and women while simultaneously relying on a one-sided system of men who protect and enforce those rights and privileges. It's completely one-sided. It's completely patriarchal. Does feminism support duties and obligations? No, feminism supports the sole pursuit of women's desire. The only obligation under feminism is to undermine patriarchy. But now that men can be women, I'm not sure what goals are left for feminists other than destroying what the remnant what's remnant of traditional Western societies and their values. Under the feminist framework, there are no duties assigned to women which produce a good for society. They're just privileges and things they like. There's no feminism that can build a good society. It requires men. It requires patriarchy. Patriarchy is in opposition to feminism. So the task tonight for our opponents is to tell us how feminism is good for society. My prediction is that anything they point to as a good will ultimately be reliant on men. I'm going to leave you with a simple syllogism here. Premise 1, a good society requires law and order. Premise 2, law and order requires the force of men. Premise 3, a society that requires the force of men is actually a patriarchy. Conclusion, a patriarchy is good for society. Now, notice if I swap out feminism, patriarchy for feminism, watch what happens. A good society doesn't require feminism at all. Feminism does require the force of men. A society that requires the force of men can't be feminist. It just can't be definitionally. So there's nothing good that feminism brings at all without it being a pretend sort of live action role playing game that relies wholly on men using their force, men's obligation to put their body as a shield, to protect women, to protect families, to protect children. Women offer nothing in return. The obligations are all there for men. There's zero obligations for women.
Thank you, Jim Bob. Jake, to you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me, Sarah. Thank you to the opponents for coming out today as well, and Jim Bob too. So feminism, I'm going to go with the same definition as Jim Bob, and I think that it has destroyed the relationship between the sexes. It's a raw deal for men, and it's also a raw deal for women. And what's more problematic is that feminism is explicitly designed to destroy the family unit, which is the bedrock of a healthy civilization. And this is echoed throughout feminist literature. You look at people like Simone de Beauvoir, who say that the family is the most important social institution in maintaining the oppression of women. Shulamith Firestone from The Dialectic of Sex said the family is the first system of oppression. It is also the most pervasive, and there are many more. We can go through them a bit more if we have a little bit of time later. So the family is the bedrock of civilization, and the feminists are crusaders for destroying and subverting this institution with their seething resentment. And when you destroy the family and women leave the home to write emails, you inevitably end up having to give your children off to the state. And this is not a new idea. This has been echoed throughout history. Even Plato, in his Republic, said that children are to be common and no parent is to know his own child or any child his parent. Engels, who wrote the Communist Manifesto, echoed something similar. Even John Stuart Mill and Antonio Gramsci, very famous communist there, echoing similar sentiments. So how does this directly relate to feminism, you might ask? Well, feminists ask for and have largely attained equal participation in the workforce, separating them from family duties and handing the children off to the state for public education. This is absolutely pervasive throughout the West at the moment, and the family structures have suffered for it. Divorce rates are much higher. Children are being handed off to the state. We have a much more impersonal relationship with our family these days. And once again, key feminist figures like Simone de Beauvoir argue that to achieve true gender equality, society must support shared responsibilities for child rearing, including state-sponsored childcare and education systems that free women from the pressure of full-time domestic work. So, last thing I would say here is that, and I think we can just pretty much cover all this in the open dialogue, but feminism is not only a horrible deal for men, it is also just a terrible deal for women. And the best thing that women can do is to completely and utterly reject feminism. Because if you want to follow the feminist messaging and propaganda, they will tell you that the sexes should be equal. This is a pipe dream. This is never going to happen. It's completely impossible. They're never going to be able to be equal to men in the things that they strive for. So therefore, it can never happen. And we can go through force doctrine and how that's actually a logical impossibility. So they'll never be equal to men. It's a bad deal. And feminism is an ideology that would be best left in the dust of history. So happy to get into it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it. As a kind reminder, everybody here is dual streaming. So if you feel free to run over to their channels, like, subscribe, share, do your job as the viewer. And again, we will always be doing open panel dumpster fire. We will have the debate, read and respond to super chats after closing statements. Then we will open up the floor to the public. Outside of that, folks, the floor is open to you.
I guess maybe what I would start with is the definition you guys gave of patriarchy was very kind of goes against any traditional definition that I've experienced, right? Which typically I think like Wikipedia and stuff would call it like some sort of hierarchical system where positions of authority are held by men. But it seems like you guys are actually calling patriarchy the enforcement arm, that the enforcement arm is mostly occupied by men, and therefore that's what a patriarchy is. So do you guys think a patriarchy is where men are soldiers and police officers, or do you think a patriarchy is when men are in positions of power?
Well, I would say positions of power are useless without the force application. So whatever you think is a position of power ultimately comes down to force anyway. So men in power, ultimately backing power and enforcing law and rights. They could put women in different positions, but that's an allowance. They don't have to. In fact, at any given time, the collection of men in any given country can completely overturn any of the allowances they give to women at any point in time.
Gotcha. So like society, for example, runs on the back of workers, right? If we don't have workers, laborers, janitors, farmers, et cetera, the society wouldn't work. That doesn't mean that society is run by workers though, right? That doesn't mean societies are running the country.
No, I would say that's disanalogous. What's productive in this example, you're arguing what's productive. We're arguing how do you even maintain the order in society such that production is even possible. You're skipping to some particular, but we're talking about how do you even have production a possibility without order, law and order. So you just granted yourself law and order so you can have production and work. By the way, your example points to productivity. The point is feminism good for society? Is it better to have productive women or to have women mother the next generation of children?
So I'm a bit curious. So say there was a society.
Wait, you didn't answer my question though. You said you're curious, but I asked you a direct question because this is a cross-examination. So is it better for women collectively, for the most part, to be rearing and having children for the next generation of the society that you want to flourish? Or should they go to the workforce and be awesome?
I don't see these things as mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So you're not going to answer the question, which is better?
My answer is these things are not mutually
Which is better for society?
You're begging the question with the question. They're not mutually exclusive concepts.
Okay, so if you were to choose to have a bunch of women, right, and you either choose for the society on net balance that they should have children for the next generation and mother those good people, or join Nike and get a lanyard in an office, what do you think is better for society?
Well, I mean,
hypothetical.
Sure, we can go into your hypothetical and I'll just engage with it.
Except you won't.
Well, I will. Obviously, you need to have children for society to even continue. The problem is that the hypothetical is disanalogous to anything that we're talking about, right? Because the problem is that in a society with freedoms and rights, things don't exist in these mutually exclusive vacuums. And so in no world are people having to choose between one or the other.
No, that's actually not true. We're under replacement right now. So we're actually in a predicament right now where we have to decide whether or not we're going to use massive amounts of social pressure and propaganda to get women away from your ideal of feminism and back into the home rearing children and having children and families. Why? Because we're not going to have enough people for the next generation. So what's important right now? You feeling good and going on a Eat, Pray, Love tour and blogging about it, or the next generation of women, women and children? Which is more important?
Part of the issue, so if I could just break this down, part of the issue with your argumentation is you're making a bit of a syllogism, right? So you're saying that society doesn't work without soldiers, soldiers are men, therefore men run society. Am I understanding you correctly?
Well, that was one aspect. The force doctrine is not something you're going to get away from. I'm happy to shift over to the force doctrine, but what I just pointed to is what's the obligation for feminists to make society good if you have no obligation to reproduce?
I don't really understand your question.
Why are you acting confused? You argue that feminism is good for society, right? I just asked you, what obligation does feminism have to reproduce for women?
Because women obviously want a flourishing society as well.
No, I didn't ask what you want. I said, do you have an obligation to?
I guess I'm not understanding your question.
Do you have an obligation, not so erudite, to reproduce?
No, nobody does.
You don't. Does any feminist that you know have the obligation to reproduce?
I don't think any human being has an
Okay.
obligation to
Do men collectively have the obligation to uphold and enforce the law with their bodies?
No, they do not have an obligation
They
to do
don't.
that.
They don't have an obligation. So if men don't have an obligation to do anything and women don't have an obligation to do anything, how the fuck are you going to argue feminism from your worldview is good for anything?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know if you know what this means. Like, I don't even
That's
know.
not
if
an
you know what
argument.
I'm talking about.
No, stop gaslighting me. I just asked you a direct question. Okay.
Okay.
I just asked you a direct question. If men from your worldview have no obligation and women have no obligation, can you tell me how anything from your worldview is good for society with no obligations?
So social contracts establish obligations. The issue is that, like, your gender, for example, isn't the thing that establishes the obligation necessarily. It's the social contract. So if you're in the military, you have an obligation, right? So if you join the military, which you do freely of will, you have an obligation to serve and protect, to listen to your sergeants, to do all the things that you're contracted to do as you join the military contract, right? Those are obligations that you have. When you are born, you have some level of contract that you necessarily establish with your sovereign state. So if you're a citizen of America, you have certain obligations to uphold, for example, by and large, trying to follow the rules of the founding documents. You're supposed to, by and
mean
large,
law?
vote. Yeah. Law.
Yeah, but you just contradicted yourself. If by being a part of the society, you have an obligation to follow the law, and you don't have an obligation to actually enforce the law from your view, you just said men don't have an obligation to enforce the law. So you have an obligation to follow the law, but you don't have an obligation to enforce it?
No, nobody has an obligation. Men don't have to be police officers.
So then why do I have an obligation from your view to follow the law?
Because you're in a social contract with your society, right?
So
you don't have
by
to-
being bored?
Yeah, by being born and getting a U.S. passport and birth certificate.
Okay, so from your view, everything's contractual.
Well, you're talking about obligations, right? So you're asking me to
Okay.
establish where obligations are, and social contracts are typically how we establish those obligations. In
Okay, so how is feminism good for whatever you're calling good right now, which is a set of what, just like arbitrary contracts between individuals? Is that it? Is that your vision of society?
Well, the thing that I love most about a democratic society, for example, is freedom of choice, right? So I think one thing that feminism does really well is it increases the agency by which women have to live, which I think is good. Typically, women will opt to use that agency to enter into obligatory contracts, such as with their workplace.
You mean contracts that are backed by force?
Force or civil law.
Yeah. Is that force predominantly men?
Again, just because a society requires, like, if we had slaves that were all of our police force, we wouldn't say that slaves are running the country.
That's not what I asked you. I said, is the force application in a society that has laws and contracts that can be policed and enforced, is it wholly dependent on mostly men to enforce those? In other words, if you swapped out all the men in the enforcement arm with women, do you think a pure collection of women could enforce flawed contracts and reach contracts between men?
Jim Bob, have you ever been to?
I just asked a question. Hold on. No, don't ask me a question right now. You can answer the question.
It was a question. It was a question.
Don't save her. I know you like saving women, but this is on her unless you want to answer it.
What's the question again? Happy to.
You didn't even hear the question. So
no, because you've been rambling like you live in this theoretical world.
Just stop.
All right, gentlemen, that's enough. Jim Bob, would you like to ask your question again? And then either Ken or Kyla can give an answer.
Is it possible for a collective of women to be the enforcement arm of a society?
100%. 100%. If you go to Israel right now, when's the last time you've been to Israel?
Israel, a lot of those women have dicks.
Could Jim Bob answer any of my questions yet? I've answered all of them.
I want to hear about Israel. I want to hear about Israel.
Tell us about Israel. Yeah.
It's just
go through the airport. Go through Ben Gurion Airport. Sorry, Kyla, go ahead.
Tell us your poetry.
No, I want to hear about Israel.
Go ahead, Kyla. Ask your question.
Well, it's just, I've asked a number of questions, and I guess, at like a meta level, I'm not really sure how to engage with you, Jim Bob, because the last time you asked me about the enforcement arm, I answered your question, and you told me to stop talking about it because you didn't like my answer. So you can't like Mott and Bailey this back and forth. Every time that you don't know how to continue your own interrogation, it doesn't mean that I'm not
the meta. No one cares about your Yelp review, okay, lady? Look, I asked you a question about something specific, and you moved over to enforcement. I said I'm happy to talk about enforcement, but I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about obligations under feminism. You, hold on, you went blank when I asked you, is there any obligations at all under feminism? Because that's a worldview, right? That's a worldview you're defending. There's no obligations.
So feminism isn't a hierarchical structure. This is the problem. You're conflating. So what you're doing is you're doing the sleight of hand where you're saying things
You're
like,
back to meta. You have no arguments, just meta commentary.
The problem is that it's impossible to engage with you without addressing any of the meta, because you're constantly doing a sleight of hand where you shift from talking about hierarchical obligations.
So feminism. So let's take one statement.
Let her finish. Let her finish, please. Let her finish.
Feminism has no hierarchy.
Do I get to finish, or do I? So
Sure, keep
no,
talking.
feminism is not an erection. So for example, if you said matriarchies, we could talk about a matriarchy hierarchy, right? However, the issue is that what you're doing is you're talking about obligations and hierarchical systems, and then you're swapping that really quickly to say, see, feminism isn't establishing. What obligations does it have? It's not a hierarchy. Feminism isn't a philosophical or political structure
What is
of
it then?
hierarchy. It's about the empowerment of women. It's about
What does that mean? What does that mean, empowerment?
Well, if I think you're Christian, right?
Yeah.
So
What does that mean, empowerment?
What does it mean when God empowers you as a Christian?
We're not talking about a Christian view. We're asking about your view.
Answer my question.
No, I just asked you, what does empowerment mean under feminism? Christian view isn't feminist. A Christian, dude, you're unbelievable amount of dodging here.
Hold on.
I just asked you.
Can you clarify?
You're like, what do you think it means? What are you talking about? I just asked you, under your view, under feminism, what is empowerment? You're like, Jim Bob, are you Christian? No, that's not what we're talking about. What does empowerment mean?
I just follow me for a second. It's okay. We're all safe here. Okay.
Safe?
Do you believe? You asked me about empowerment. I need Jim Bob.
We're safe here?
I need you to stop interrupting and control your emotions for just like 1 second. So you asked me about empowerment, and for looking for common ground, I said, well, you're a Christian. So what does it mean when God empowers you? That's what I'm asking you. Because I think we'll have a similar answer.
I don't share that platitude, okay? That's not my theology. I don't go, God empowers me, okay? That's not even in my paradigm right now. So you're just assuming your own platitudes and bumper stickers apply to me, and it's a way for you to dodge the question. You said you want women empowered. I said, give me an example under feminism of women being empowered. Is offing your offspring empowering under feminism?
So you don't believe that God?
You're not going to answer a single question.
I've answered multiple.
Total dodge.
Would Jake and Ken like to kind of maybe chime in here?
Let's pretend I'm a Satanist and I don't care about any empowerment for a second. Okay. Let's pretend it doesn't exist.
I thought we had a common ground.
No, we don't. We don't have a common ground. You're not a Christian.
All right. Jake.
Yeah, I'm happy to
and
jump
Ken,
in. I would like to know, Ken, how exactly is, so you think you're trying to tell me that if they took all of the men away and they took all of the men out of the IDF, then all of the women would be able to fight Hamas and Iran just fine?
No, the question was about an enforcement mechanism. And if you look at the police force in Israel right now, if you go through Ben Gurion Airport, it is 90% female, and they do a hell of a job. You do not want to take
because they're patting people.
Just how theoretical your arguments are, your worldview is.
Theoretical.
Jake,
just pointed to an airport.
Please let him finish.
You're referring to a philosopher who was born 120 years ago as your basis for explaining feminism. That's just not the world we live in today.
That's when feminism began.
The reality is, when you look at women's role in the military, for example, on the front lines, and my guess is y'all haven't been within 20 clicks of an actual trench or an actual fight. I've actually been in an argument. And
wow,
I've put my life in the hands of women who have saved it on more than one occasion. I would do it again. And there are plenty of examples throughout history, in society even today. Go back to, Boudicca taking on the Romans and beating them in Great Britain, up to the
with
women
an army of men.
and up to the women in Israel today who, yeah, I would put the lionesses against Hamas any day. I've seen that up close in Ukraine. The most feared units in some of those areas at the front are female units. And look, I think that you're great at the theory. You're great at bringing up the philosophers who are 120 years old, but in terms of real experience, go live a little. Go talk to an actual woman.
How is this an argument?
This is not an argument, dude. This is just
somehow,
emotional.
What is this, part of your journal?
This idea that women are somehow unable to do both. Look, I've got 3 kids, right? And I'm a feminist, married to a feminist. If your sole objective of like the woman's role in society is procreating, we're managing to do both. So I'm bringing in actual experience on top of your theory to prove the point.
Whose word wins
about in the real world?
Whose word wins in the house with you?
Allow me to make a clarification here. Anecdotal usually doesn't work very well in terms of a debate, Ken. So I have an appreciation for experience and anecdotal, stories and so on and so forth. But as far as like making an argument goes, it doesn't really get anywhere in terms of a debate is formed.
Let's take you back to the topic. Feminism is good for society. The question is, does Ken know some tough chicks? Would you agree, Ken, that a good society requires law and order?
Absolutely. I've been part of enforcing.
Oh, no. We don't need a big story, dude. Stop.
Well, Bob, you should be able to control your emotions.
No, stop. I'm totally not emotional. This is just assertive. You think assertive is emotional.
I'm going to separate the two of you if you don't stop.
I'm trying to run a line of argument, and Eurodite's doing the save Ken thing, right? You guys save each other. Okay, you guys can't even follow a basic argument right now.
I get it. You're the Angela clone. You took.
Okay, let me. I knew the two of you would be definitely at each other's throats. So let me just make some clarifying points here. The interruptions don't help. I know I said this before. If somebody isn't getting there, you got to let them spit it out, and then we can intervene as we need to. But try not to interrupt. We want to be able to make our point. So if you could I will tell him to land the plane. If I need to, I will get there, but the interruptions don't help.
I want to continue with the Israel and the airport. So Ken, what exactly is your claim here? You're saying that the women are the enforcement arm of the IDF in Israel?
Yeah, my claim is, well, you're conflating the IDF with the airport enforcement, but that's beside the point. My claim is that feminism.
So you're talking about the people who pat people down.
Sorry, say that. I didn't hear you.
So then you're talking about the people who pat you down at the airport and put you through the electrical machines.
Well, and stop the terrorists from blowing up planes.
Do they? Do they stop them all? Of course. They're diving.
So
yeah.
Okay. What about on the front lines? Because I'm sure
over an El Al plane.
I mean, I'm sure that you're aware, Ken, that they're currently fighting a war. What kind of an involvement do women have in that war?
Pretty significant, especially when it comes to the checkpoints and making sure. I mean, look, I'm not an expert on the IDF. I am an expert on the U.S. military and the role of women in Afghanistan, for example, on the front lines, or in Ukraine right now. I can absolutely speak with a fair amount of authority on that. And look, women have a absolutely vital role to play, and I think the best way to prove.
So what is their role, though? Like, what exactly is their role?
The best way to prove the point is give you the example of what happens when you don't allow the best in society to fill those roles. You have an army.
It's not my question. It's not my question. It's not my question.
The best would be men anyway.
Again and again. And look, some of the best pilots I flew with.
Anecdotal. Dude, this is anecdotal, Ken. This is a really weak argument. Can we stick to the argument that we're talking about? We're talking about Israel right now, and you're saying that your claim before was essentially that if you look around Israel, that the women are the enforcement arm. Was that your claim, or were you just saying that they pat you down at the airport?
My claim was that their security, what keeps Israeli travelers safe, is women, and that is a very dangerous environment.
Okay, and then who do you think is fighting on the front lines in the current war that they've got at the moment when they're going into Gaza and doing ground invasions in Gaza? Is it men or is it women?
It's men and women. Again, I would rather speak to something
Equal?
I am probably not equal. No, definitely not.
Well, we're
equal.
being charitable
65
here because Israel probably does have the largest amount of women because the women get conscripted, but it's mostly in support roles. And if you look at the death toll, there's been 891 deaths of the IDF during this war, and 757 of them have been men.
Yeah, men serve in disproportionate numbers, but it is to the strength of Israeli society. It is to the strength of Israeli society that they are able to pick the best people for those really difficult missions. And feminism allows women to have those opportunities and defend Israeli society. Without it, you get weaker societies like Afghanistan, like Iran. And
well, Israel is an example where they actually get conscripted, but they get conscripted into support roles, right? So if you look at other countries where it's not conscription, these women actually don't even volunteer for the army. It's all men who do it. And you're talking about US. Let's talk about something that you.
So in Ukraine,
sure. Let's talk about. Okay. Well, let's just talk about something that you're really familiar with.
Is through the roof, and
what's the death toll?
Women volunteering for frontline roles, Ukraine would have been rolled over.
I've seen them making the TikToks. I've seen it. So what's the death toll in Ukraine, men to women?
I don't know.
You don't know? Yeah, it's much less than 1%. Much less than 1%.
I don't think anyone here would say, for example, that men don't disproportionately represent military. Like, nobody's arguing with you on that, Jake. I think the more pertinent question that Ken is posing is, if the best person for every position in the military is a man, why are militaries that are all men dog shit, like North Korea or Hamas?
What are you talking about?
How do you determine their dog shit? What do you mean? How do you measure that?
Do you think that Hamas and North Korea are excellent military systems?
How are you measuring? You made the claim. Don't ask me. You're the one who made the claim.
Okay, I think
I'll give you.
How did you measure? No, wait, hold on. No, don't save her. Stop it, dude. Stop saving her.
It's okay.
Jim Bob, do you think that the North Korean army is super strong and capable and powerful and worth fearing, or do you think the American military is better?
I've not gone into gauging that, but you made a statement that you did. So I'm asking you, how did you determine that?
Compete with America?
You keep asking me a question based on your claim. Is that your tactic? You made a claim. Yeah, it is your tactic to totally avoid. So you
right? I think
listen.
As the military vet in the room,
so you're not gonna. You just say shit, and then when you're asked how do you verify that, you say, well, what do you think? Right? That's your whole thing.
About the meta anymore, Jim.
Nice work. Let's get back to the topic. How is feminism? Name one way in America. How is feminism good for society? That's the topic.
Great. I'll give you a way. It allows the best people to be able to, in some cases they're women, to be able to contribute that talent to society. And I think the military, which is my source of experience, is a phenomenal example of that. America has the best military in the world. I defy you to name another military, save perhaps Ukraine, that can.
Do we have the best Navy SEALs, you think?
And it's because we allow the best people to fill those roles, and sometimes they happen to be women.
Well,
feminism isn't about making sure that there is 50-50 representation. So that whole argument,
I don't really.
Israel and Ukraine is just a canard. Feminism isn't about 50-50 representation. It's about making sure you afford the opportunity for the best people to fill those roles. And America is a great example of that working incredibly well. Ukraine is a great example of that working incredibly well.
How is it good for society? Society we're talking about.
It defends society when you have a better military. I guarantee you.
Is it better military?
Feminism in America has allowed us to build a military.
Wrap it up, brother.
That can,
it's unbelievable.
Well, he keeps getting interrupted, so it does make it longer, and then I can't say anything because you've already interrupted him 5 times. So I hear you.
Interrupting, right? Like if men are supposed to be the calm ones, it's a little insane that the people who are interrupting the least are the 2 women on the panel.
More meta. You're really good at meta.
Okay. All right. Settle down.
You're afraid of it, Jim Bob.
Pretty much all you do.
I cannot, Jim Bob, I cannot ask him to land his plane because you have interrupted him 5 times. If you let me see my way in, I can, but you keep interrupting, so I have to let him continue. Ken, if you could land the plane, that would be great. Thank you.
Societies that embrace feminism, which allows the best people in those societies to achieve those, to fill those roles, are better than societies that don't. and the proof is in how you match up these militaries. The ones that have a feminist basis crush the ones that don't every time.
Wait, what? You're saying that what feminism is good for societies because the military with more women crush the all men militaries? Is that what you're saying?
The militaries that provide fair opportunities for people to fill those roles based on merit and talent are better militaries.
Okay, so you're just pointing to the fairness aspect, not the performance aspect.
Well, fairness leads to the standards are kept, and
They are.
the opportunity is afforded to men and women alike. And if you achieve the standard, you get the best people out of society that way.
Okay, so if I'm in a trench with a choice of 3 men or 3 women, you're saying I could choose either?
I think a cockpit is probably a better analogy, but sure, if they meet the standard.
No, it's not a
you
better
want the
analogy
best
because
people.
you have to be able to carry people out of war zones. You have to be able to do all sorts of physical labor inside of a war zone. We're not talking about flying a cockpit or flying a drone from Burbank, California.
Sure we are.
Right?
That's modern warfare. That's
What? No.
absolutely how wars are fought these days. And maybe if you listen a little more, you'd learn that. But when you afford
Our
women
argument
the
is that
opportunity
because
to apply for those roles, you get the best people, and that makes society stronger.
How does it make society stronger?
Because
Well, I think you have to defend a society in order to strengthen it.
Wait, what? But no, that doesn't tell me how it makes society stronger. What is
Sure.
a strong
A
society?
A good military strengthens society because it protects society.
Well, no, you can have a strong military to protect a really shitty, broken society. That doesn't even follow.
Sure, but you can't have a society that is strong that cannot defend itself.
Right. And that goes to our point. You can't defend yourself without wholly dependent on men. In other words, if you swapped all the men in the IDF, there's 65% men in the IDF and the rest is women and probably some ambiguity in between. So if you wouldn't swap them with women and say, oh, it's no problem, right?
Yeah, well, I think you're misunderstanding the argument that feminism makes. You're assuming it's arguing for a full replacement of men, or even
I didn't say
like
that.
parity,
Dude.
50-50
Stop.
men and women.
I didn't say
what
that.
it argues
I said
is that
stop.
women
oh my
are.
gosh, dude, this filibustering is insane. You
The
just go on this.
interruptions are insane.
No, dude,
Do I get to make my point, or are you going to interrupt every single time?
No, you're
and
talking.
try to make my point.
Okay.
Dude,
All
you're
right.
talking like
all right,
700
all
words
right.
per my 30. That wasn't, you just straw man what I said. okay?
Offer the clarification, Jim Bob.
I just basically said this, right? Isn't it the case that you couldn't? I didn't say you would or you should. I'm not saying you're thinking you should. I'm saying could you swap out all of the males from your view, all of the males in the army with women, and it would be equal?
Of course not, but that's not the argument
Why not?
feminism is making.
Well, I didn't say you're making any arguments. You guys actually don't have any arguments.
Well,
So
of course
the-
we have arguments. The problem is
there-
that you won't
the
answer
re-
questions. You won't follow a line of dialogue. So, like,
What?
nobody
And you
has
won't
ever
even
looked
meta.
at all
More meta,
women
yeah.
militaries.
The
as
projection.
what would be the best
More
situation.
dodging,
It's not
more
what feminism
dodging.
is saying. There's no dodging that's happened. Jim,
Yeah.
the only person who's
We're getting-
refused to answer questions.
we're
is
getting to the-
yourself, right?
Yeah, right.
You
Yeah,
haven't
right.
even, for example, established how feminism.
Lady, I have the clips of you
hierarchy.
dodging questions, okay? So
How
look,
is
how's
what
it
is
relevant?
empowerment? You
How
can't
is it
answer
relevant?
that question.
how is it relevant? This is
All
why
of
it's
it is relevant.
relevant. Right,
All
this is
of it can be
relevant. I'm telling you how it's relevant. Society requires law and order. A good society requires law and order. You guys agree? Law and order relies on predominantly men, okay? Women can't collectively defend their own rights, correct?
So who are you?
Can
you
women collectively defend their own rights? Yes or no?
I've
No,
seen plenty
nobody's
of examples of
advocating
that,
for an
sure.
only
What?
women military.
What? Excuse me? You're both talking. One of you at a time.
No one is advocating for a women only.
That didn't answer my question. Let's go to Ken, since you don't want to answer questions.
I'm sure there are
Ken,
plenty of examples of women.
Let's give me
advocating
one
for their own
example of a collective of women who either took rights from people or defended their own rights.
I don't know. The suffragette movement was pretty effective at,
Great. Yeah, let's get into
at
this.
gaining their own
Yeah.
at gaining their rights.
Really? Oh, really? Did they use force to do that, or did it require men to do that?
They actually
honestly
used
not
force
an expert on the suffragette
No,
movement.
no, it required men. And here's the other thing about the suffragettes, Ken. All of the women, the majority of the women, were actually against the suffragette movement. In fact, the suffragette movement actually thwarted the showing up of the women to vote against being able to get the vote. They actually shut them down. So not only are you ignorant to the suffragette movement, that it was primarily anti women voting, was against the movement. And in the end, guess what, Ken? Any policy you think is progress, you and Erudite think is progress, anything you find is progressive and feminist friendly relies wholly on a disparity between the obligations of men and women. What we're pointing to is you haven't presented one good thing for society from a feminist view.
That's because you haven't listened to a word we've said.
You said the military. No, I debunked you.
Point.
Wait, hold on. We've said we've established multiple things, right?
Yeah, give me one,
started this
Erudite.
out. Yeah, I gave you one immediately, which I said
What?
the innovation scale. It increases the innovation scale by 50%, which is good for GDP.
The
Yeah,
innovation
but this is just a
scale?
graph go up. This is just a graph go up argument, Erudite. And if you don't actually have a labor force, if you have a declining birth rate, then you actually can't develop a labor force, and you've got to bring it all in from the third world. So
I'm super curious, Jake. Do you think that America would be nearly as dominant if it didn't allow women into its workforce?
do you think it would be nearly as dominant? Yeah, I think it would. I think it was just as dominant
If it was
before.
only men and every other country allowed women in, but we didn't, that we would be the dominant hegemonic global force?
Oh, there would probably be some sort of a social restructuring. It couldn't just happen overnight. I mean, women are so deeply embedded into the labor force right now and into the workforce that it wouldn't be able to happen overnight.
So let's say we can go back in time in the 60s, right? When women are first starting to enter the workforce, 40s to 60s. Do you think that China would have been able to outcompeted us when it allowed women in if we refused to?
What do you mean?
Do you think that the GDP of America would have rose as aggressively and competitively without 50% of a labor infusion if every other country was infusing that labor into its workforce?
Maybe. I'm not too sure.
You really think that if we
how would
just
you know
didn't
that?
allow 50% of our workforce, that we would somehow America would be the global hegemon?
Asking him a question
we don't
and
really know
being
that.
incredulous about the question isn't an argument. You're just basically arguing from
What? You're right,
incredulity.
Jim Bob. I don't need to make an
No,
argument.
you're
for
just
science.
arguing.
You make
All you
them
do is
I
this is what
think,
you do.
Jim
You
Bob,
don't really
I think
you don't really think that, right? That's not an argument, okay? Are you
it's
making
just
an
a
affirmative
style.
claim?
Hold on, Jim Bob. I think it's just a style of speaking, the way she's asking questions. It would be it's the same way you're asking questions. She's just formulating them differently. That's all. That's
Yeah,
all.
I'd like to hear the argument, though. What do you think? Do you think that it wouldn't have?
Yeah, I think with not allowing 50% of an increase in global workforce compared to every other country allowing that 50% increase, America would have been decimated. There's no world that we would have competed in any way GDP if we had 50% less of a labor workforce than every other country. That would be really bad.
Yeah, I mean, but like you look at it right now, and the birth rate is plummeting to the ground, and you've got to import the entire third world in order to actually sustain your labor market. You see this in Canada, where you're from, Erudite.
Sure, that's bad though, right? You and I can both agree that declining birth rates is bad. That has nothing to do with the argument.
Exactly.
But women entering
that
the
has a lot
workforce
to do with
was good
feminism,
for
though.
GDP. Yeah, but
This has a lot to do with feminism, though.
Sure, so we can go into that separately, but first we have to tackle the GDP question. So do you have any other reason as to why women entering the workforce isn't good for GDP? Or do you agree with me?
yes.
What happened? What happened?
Hold
The
on,
debt,
Jamal, let
the
Jake
debt
answer.
for women went up, right, dude?
no.
Look, no, this is a debate, okay? So not so erudite. When you shove all the women under the guise of liberation from the home into the workforce, what does it do? It saturates the work market. It actually shows a trend of the amount of pay that everyone gets and goes down because you're just throwing the women out of the home, right? Their obligations is no longer to raise children, have children, make good humans for the next generation. It's to go chase shit. And what happens is you just load all the people in, right? And then what do we have now? We have a saturated market that you call a really great workforce, right? No, it's not.
I think the American GDP workforce is incredible.
Who cares what you think? It doesn't matter because if you
Every
saturate,
single respected economist, every single geopolitical leader, every single person in the entire world would agree that the American
and they're all in debt,
GDP
right? It's
is
great, and they're all in
incredible.
debt,
Okay,
right? And everyone's in
you don't
debt.
like America? I think America's
So are you in
incredible. I
debt?
think GDP is
Are you in
impressive.
debt?
Yes, it's also in debt, and
Are
it has
you in
nothing
debt?
to do with its GDP.
Are you in debt?
No, I am not in debt.
Okay, so when you look at women who go through college and then they're all in debt, and you're like, "This
Sorry,
is
what does this
kick
have to do
ass."
with anything? What does this
It
have
has
to
to
do with
do what is the topic of the debate there,
Well, it
Erudite?
feels like you're dodging my GDP argumentation to just move
Yeah,
into
because
debt
you're pointing to one
mathematics.
thing that you can look at the number and say that good, and we're not talking
Well,
about
you
the
can't
society
establish
on
why
net
it's
balance.
not good, right?
What can you manipulate the GDP? Can it be other variables? Could you possibly know all the variables that contribute to the GDP?
Yeah, there are
You
other
could?
factors.
You know
That,
all of them? You know all of them?
I don't know all
Okay,
of them
cool.
off of the top of my head. Do you know all of them?
What is it better for the
Bob, do
GDP
you
to
know all of the factors
I'm
that
asking you a
contribute to
question.
GDP?
No, you're the one making the
Okay.
claim. So
Well,
you're the
I'm
one
not
making
claiming
these
that I
claims.
know everything about the GDP. I'm saying that
what
when
happens
women
to
enter
this
the
girl.
workforce and you increase the workforce by 50%, it increases your GDP. This is obvious, right?
Yeah, who cares if everyone's in debt and they get paid shit? What's the point?
Debt is a tool, right? The issue with like
I didn't ask you
modern-
what you think debt is. I said,
Well,
what
I
good
didn't
is
say
it
what
for
I think debt
society?
is. I said what debt is. Debt is a tool, right? So while I agree that, for example, the fact that we're paying more interest payments than we are for like buying into our military is really bad, debt in and of itself isn't bad, and GDP isn't really in
Has
relationship.
debt gone up since? Has
So
debt?
there-
Yes or no? Yes or no? Has debt gone up for women since they entered the workforce?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, cool. Is that good?
It's neutral. Debt is neutral.
Oh,
It
it's
can be
neutral.
bad and it
It's
can be
totally
good.
neutral being in debt and not being able
Debt
to
is
afford
typically
anything.
neutral.
Right.
So, for
Okay,
example,
cool.
maybe I could outline this to you. So, one of the reasons why debt can be really beneficial, for example, is in an era of inflation. So, when inflation happens, every single dollar is worth less, like tomorrow and the next year, which is why if you have $1,000 of debt right now, a year from now, that $1,000 of debt is literally worth less, which is why the richest people on the planet, like Elon Musk and whatnot, constantly work through debt. They consolidate debt, they move it between accounts, but debt is absolutely
usually
a way
good.
that you manage money and income. I didn't say
Usually
debt is
good.
all good. I said debt can be good.
It can be good. Can debt be really bad too, or no?
Yeah, of course.
You said it's neutral, so now you're in a contradiction.
No, I said debt.
You said
is a
neutral.
tool. It's
You said debt is
It can
neutral.
no, I said it's neutral, which means it can be good and it can be bad.
No, that would mean
So-
it's neither good or bad.
Yeah. It's like
So, I guess we can get semantics. I'll update my statement.
semantics
Sure.
on what the word neutral means. Yeah,
Debt
we
is a
should.
tool, is what I initially said. The debt as a tool can be used for good things, and it can be used for bad things, and it can be used for neutral things.
Okay, so how is it good to advocate for women to, let's say, not stay in the home and have children and instead acquire debt through some shitty social science and go get a job while they're in debt and they can barely afford to even make it to work, let alone their bills and their car payments? Why is that good? As opposed to our stance is, women shouldn't go out into the workforce. We should prioritize a high level funded campaign to get women to have children and to build the next generations of humans. You're arguing, well, there's no obligation, right? Either way, there's no obligation. We're asking you, why is it good why is feminism good in this particular instance where I'm arguing, Jake and I are arguing, no, don't advocate for women. Actually advocate against it. The ones who break through, fine. If you want to work that bad, great. But at least advocate for women to stay in the home, get married, have children for the next generation. That's going to be more fruitful than them acquiring debt and earning a badge and a cute card for the company they work for. But you're arguing, are you arguing one or the other in this position? I actually don't even know.
Well, it's kind of, well, you probably should know because I've said it a number of times. I think part of the problem is now you're doing the Mott and Bailey thing again. So now you're saying
More
feminism
meta.
is when
Please let her finish
it's other
uninterrupted.
fallacies. We've done it a number of times, right? It's okay. If you define feminism as women have debt and not kids, then that version of whatever you're calling feminism, I would agree, is not good. However, nobody defines feminism that way, right? I offered us a definition of feminism as empowering women, right?
And you couldn't
I
tell me
think
what empowering
feminism-
is.
Let her finish.
Well, you also couldn't tell me what empowering is.
It's not,
But I
I'm not
answered-
making the
I-
statement.
Pause, breathe. You can do it. I also answered the question and I said
Unbelievable.
empowerment is giving people choice, which is what Christ does for us. That's when we say that Christ has empowered us. It means that we have free will for salvation. We can choose him or not.
Is
choose
Christ a
him.
patriarchy?
What?
Is Christianity a patriarchy? You're referencing Christ right
yeah.
now. Okay, so do you want a Christian nation then?
I don't believe that Christianity should be blended with politics. No.
Oh, so you don't think my Christian view should inform my view on, say, abortion? What are you talking about?
No, it should absolutely as a voter.
Oh, so
I
that's a
just don't think-
contradiction.
it's not a contradiction.
You
right?
just
There's
contradicted yourself.
It's not a contradiction. I can outline why it's not a contradiction if you'd like.
So premise 1, I don't think you should infuse your theology into politics. Also, premise 2, you should have your theology inform your view on politics.
Okay, so I know you really like wandering around because you really didn't like the GDP argument. So I will pick us back up because we need to go back to the GDP argument because you claimed that we didn't have any argument for how feminism is good. And I argued that the reason why feminism good is in one standard that it raises GDP by allowing women to enter the workforce, which I think is good for society, right? So we can go back to the whatever.
I didn't ask to go back there. You brought up Christianity. Let's stay right with Christianity. You said you argued for
and running away from the GDP.
I didn't wander. You literally just said Christianity.
When I talked about GDP, you switched it all of a sudden to debt. And then when we were talking more about debt, then you switched it to how I couldn't answer about empowerment. And then I outlined how Christianity talks about empowerment. And now we're talking about Christianity.
Christianity also talks about patriarchy.
About GDP. Do you want to talk about GDP?
No, Christianity also talks about patriarchy, but now you're like, well, let's appeal to Christianity.
That's the point, right?
You just rambled a bunch.
Let's pick one or the other. Christianity in terms of empowerment or Christianity in terms of patriarchy, either one. I see that it comes from both sides there, so let's pick one and go.
Well, if you're going to GDP, if we want to go back to the actual topic, which is feminism good for society, then contend with my argument that feminism allows women to choose to enter the workforce, which increases our GDP dramatically by having a 50%.
And I said, who gives a shit if everyone's in debt and can't afford their bills? Useless.
Right. And so then I outlined to you how debt is a tool. Do you have a rebuttal?
I don't care if it's a tool. If people can't afford, right? If you flood the market with people getting all after the same jobs, what happens to the payment of that job?
Well, initially you're going to have a wage drop, and then
has that happened since women have entered the workforce? Yes or no?
I believe initially there was a wage drop, and then what happened is that there were so many more workers that small business owners could suddenly afford to buy workers, and so more innovation occurred. This is why when we talk about the innovation scale that Ken was referencing, having more workers allows for more innovation scale. You have more people to pick from. It drives wages down. It allows people to afford workers more effectively, and now you have more industry, and suddenly you have more jobs, and therefore more GDP. This is how workforce entering the labor pool increases GDP.
Okay, and that's good for a society that is lacking on children?
Well, these are two separate issues, right?
No, they're not.
They're not two separate issues. They're not two separate issues.
Because if you're arguing feminism is good for X and X is good for flourishing, we're asking you long-term positions, right? Because if you're a feminist, which both of you are, you're making a worldview claim about not only now, but the future, right? We're asking you from your worldview, which you're defending tonight, if feminism is good for society, how is it good for future generations if from both of your view, you have no obligation to reproduce?
I mean, we can answer this in multiple ways, but GDP is still the answer. There's innovator scale, GDP, production labels.
Yeah, but Carla, what do you think is better? Do you think it's better if the marketplace and the workforce is entirely flooded with women? If you take it to either of the maxims, if women are just in the workforce 100%, or if women are 100% making babies, what do you think is better for a long-term thriving society?
This is what Jim Bob already asked me. It's a mutual exclusive, improbable reality. Broadly,
it's just taking it to its logical maxim.
Well, the issue is that feminism is saying that only women should only do work. They should say fourth wave feminism, for example, is very pro-mom. Well, branches of it. And then there's some antinatalists, but I hate the antinatalists.
But what do you think the answer to the question is, though? If we had to go in one direction or the other, do you think it's better fluffy notepads and emails, or do you think it's better families and children?
I already answered it. I already said, of course, you need families and birth rate to continue. The issue is that you're creating you're creating a false dichotomy. Right?
So graph go up.
These things, the graph goes up is important when understanding GDP. This doesn't happen.
But it's not long term. It's not sustainable.
Well, women can enter the workforce and have children, right?
But they end up
can do,
right? Yeah.
And if they hand their kids off to the state, sure, they can do. Yeah. But in terms of the long term, this is a rather new experiment that we've run here in terms of the graph go up that you're talking about. Yes, for the short term, you could argue that it does make the GDP go up. But how's that actually good for society in the long term? That's what we want to know.
Well, a whole bunch of reasons. Strong GDP is really good for a nation for a number of reasons. First of all, it increases jobs, so everyone has more jobs. It increases global wealth of that country. GDP is also incredibly, incredibly important for soft power negotiations at a geopolitical level. So if you don't have a strong GDP as a country, your trade routes are harder. You're going to get tariffed more. You're going to get into trouble more in trades. And so your soft power negotiation skills with foreign groups, particularly hostile ones, is vastly decreased if you don't have the GDP to compete with them. So here's a false dichotomy, but a hypothetical. Do you think a society that has 0% women in the workforce is better than a society that allows women to be in or out of the workforce? Would it be better if there's no women in the workforce?
Yes, in the long
It'd be better than what we
yes.
have today. Yeah.
Yeah, well, in the long term, yes, better.
So then why is Afghanistan such a shit country?
Because
Because
oh wow, cool red herring. So first of all, you can't
There's no
you
women in
can't
the
just
workforce.
no, stop. So does Afghanistan are they also informed by a worldview?
Yeah, they have a
Okay,
theocracy.
cool. So are we Islam? Are you arguing with Islamicists right now, erudite, or are you just
No, I'm
this
arguing with
dishonest?
somebody-
Are you this dishonest?
This isn't dishonest, Jim Bob.
Yes,
so
it
the reason
is.
why this
Yes, it is.
analogous-
Oh, sweetie, don't give me that fucking phone. Look, you just said,
You're
oh,
okay,
what
girl.
happened to this other country acting like you're basically just argued from this position that look at this other country that has all these other variables and look what turned out for them as if we're holding that position. It's just dishonest.
Can you find me any single country that exists right now or historically where women were absolutely not allowed in the workforce? and the
Nobody's
country is
arguing
better
that
and
they
more
shouldn't be
competitive as a
allowed.
result of it?
Dude, you're so dishonest. We didn't say they shouldn't be allowed. Okay, another slip from your little fork tongue. We said it's better if they don't. Is that the same as they shouldn't be allowed?
Oh, so you
Answer
would
the
say that
question.
it's not.
No, answer the
you would say
question.
it's- No.
Is it
I
the
didn't say
same? Can you answer any questions? Is it the same?
answer all of your
Yeah,
questions, Jim
It's
Bob.
one yes or no question.
I
is
answered
me
all
say-
of your
is
questions,
me
Jim
s-
Bob.
Oh, it's a yes or no question. Let's see if you can do it. When I say it's better to have women out of the workforce and at the home, is that the same statement as they shouldn't be allowed to work?
No, it's as
Okay,
just
great.
false. So
Cool.
I hold on.
Stop
We can
lying.
back you
Stop
up.
being a
Do you want me
liar.
to walk you through again? I can hold your hand.
Wow,
up
how
now.
you're a liar?
Why
Yeah.
did I use
No,
a
it's
false
what you did, erudite, was you asked a hypothetical and then we answered the
Liar.
hypothetical and then you said, well, that's what you guys must think. When actually it doesn't account for the nuance in our view.
That's not what I did.
Snake.
What I actually did, so Jake, I can outline to what I did. So you guys asked me a false dichotomy where you created two things that were mutually exclusive and wouldn't be allowed to exist together. Where you said women at home or women in the workforce not having children. And I said, well, that's really, these things are not mutually exclusive.
And then you said women at home and I didn't say, oh, well, you think that all women should be at home. I didn't do that. You did
What I
that.
did instead is I gave you a question where I made two things that are obviously stupid to pretend that they're mutually exclusive, and then you answered, these things aren't mutually exclusive, which obviously is true, which is what my original answer was to whether they should stay at home or go to work.
All right, well,
My
let me
answer-
give
they
you
should
let me give you the
probably
re-
do
what.
both as they like.
Why are priorities?
Okay, let me give you the real
suddenly
story. I'll give you the real
mutually
story of what just happened, erudite. We asked a hypothetical and we said, well, if you take it to its maxim, would it be better if women were just staying at home or if women were just flooding the workforce and being wage slaves? You said staying at home. We said, sure. Then we developed the argument. We could have said, okay, well, erudite, you think that women should all just stay at home. Why do you think, where are all women just staying at home? We could have done that. But that's exactly what you did with your hypothetical. You asked us an unrealistic hypothetical and then you claimed that that was our position. That was what you did.
So what I did is I took your argument, which is that women shouldn't be in the workforce, and I took it to its maxim, which would be 0% of women in the workforce. And I asked you to give me an example of a country, for example, that is stronger as a result of having 0% of women in the workforce.
Before we flooded the women in the workforce, that was a pretty good time in America. Before we thought, oh, feminism, let's just flood society. Let's give women the vote, first of all, like against their will, by the way, predominantly their will. They were like, no, we don't want this. We won't. This is a threat to how we live. This is a threat to our values. No, just trump those people, step over them, and give the women the right to vote, and then vote for all these policies, right, that are actually end up hurting families and women, right, on net balance. Like, they're not good. Like, feminism as a net balance is not good for society. And the only counters you guys gave so far is GDP and I fought along some really brute IDF soldiers, and they're really good at airport luggage.
Scale, right? We also said innovation scale, and then greater freedoms and rights leads to flourishing. So one question that I actually
Flourishing
have,
of who?
either
If
of
there's
you
no
two,
people, dude.
was America stronger before or after World War II?
Stronger in what sense? This is like lofty
The GDP,
language.
the country, well, in the way that we usually mean it. Was it a global hegemonic country?
Before when?
Before and after World War II. Was it stronger before or after World War
Well,
II?
we were strong in the sense that we still made stuff inside the country.
That's not an answer to my question, Jim Bob.
Yeah, it is. That's an aspect of strength. Another aspect of strength is families were together more. Hold on, let me answer your question. Okay. Keep the slithering tongue in your mouth for a second. So, families were more together. People were married for longer at that time, right? So that the actual foundation of a society is what Jake and I are arguing. You're looking at particular things you like, right? We're looking at the foundation. This is our argument against feminism. You guys don't look at foundations. You just look at the topical things you like as a result, right? All of these preferences,
power, right? That's what I'm interested in.
What good is a global power for a country whose homes are completely dismantled?
Well, for one thing, they can at least rebuild their homes rather than be invaded by.
You mean families? You mean homes? You mean families?
Sure. Yeah, I use the word you use, but yeah.
So is feminism? Do you think feminism is in more support of the traditional family or less in support?
I think most feminists would be against right now. There's a lot of antinatalists. I just think that that's bad. I think that's a bad part of feminism, but that's not a part I own.
Okay, so you split yourself up in the feminist view and you say there's a feminist who went too far. Here's some feminists that didn't go too far.
Just like other denominations, right? We don't all agree with necessarily.
I understand, but what we're saying is that feminism, the view itself, is a movement away from a patriarchal system.
I would, yes, for the most part. Yep, it's not the worst thing necessarily.
I didn't say if it's a worst thing. I said, is it a good thing?
It's neutral.
It's a neutral thing. What's the topic of the debate? You concede the debate.
Good for society.
You're concede the debate. Is feminism good for society? I'm neutral.
What you're doing again is you're talking about a hierarchical system, and you're conflating that with feminism. Feminism isn't a hierarchical system. You could talk about
why it's not good for society.
Yeah,
that's why it's not good for society.
About matriarchies, for example, that by and large they're not a very strong strategic competition. That's why matriarchies dominate.
One claim at a time. One claim at a time. You said feminism's not a hierarchical system. Is it better or worse for a society to have a hierarchical system to keep it in order?
It's fundamental to a society. You need.
It's fundamental to a society for a hierarchy to exist. Feminism doesn't provide a hierarchy. Is it better to choose between the two, of a system that has a hierarchy, being that it's necessary for its foundation, and feminism not having the necessary foundations for a society?
I'd love to jump in and
don't save her.
Stop, Jim Bob. Remember earlier you jumped in for Jake. Hold on. You jumped in for Jake earlier when she asked Jake
Now you're
question.
saving, moderator. You're saving now. This is what happens when you put women in power. This is exactly what happens.
Stop it.
Everything turns into a fucking daycare center.
Well, let me change your diaper, Jim Bob. Stop it. You jumped in on a question she asked Jake earlier, so I think it's fair
just got her in a corner and he saved her. And you're like, yeah, let him save her. Come on.
That's up to him. That's why you're still of you.
You can re-ask me afterwards, okay? But it's fair to let Ken and Jake. I promise you can ask me your false dichotomy afterwards as well. I promise.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, no. Look, I just want my time to be valuable here. I've been here for an hour and a half, and would love to get a word in edgewise with Jim Bob interrupting constantly. The answer to the question about hierarchy. Sorry, what was that, Jim Bob?
I said cry harder.
What does that mean?
Just keep going with the question, bro.
Just make a fucking argument.
Jim Bob is treating this like a therapy session. He forgets that we're in a debate, so he's been very
so insufferable. This is
for your emotions now, Ken. Which is
go ahead with your thoughts, Ken.
Yeah, feminism does introduce a hierarchy of merit, not of gender or anything else, but feminism allows the best in a society to reach their potential and to fill those roles, whether they're in the military or in research or any of those things, which in a society that embraces feminism, they do better at. And study after study establishes this, whether it's the OECD study in 2015 or the constant reports from the UN on societies that embrace this kind of equality versus those that don't. Feminism is a hierarchy of merit, and that makes society stronger.
So you think that that men and women are equal then, Ken?
No.
No? You think that in a military sense that men and women are equal?
No.
No? So then you're always going to need the enforcement arm of
better
men?
than men in some areas of the military, much better. They're way better
at
checkpoints in Afghanistan. Like, it is impossible for a male to manage a voting booth that is reserved for women in Afghanistan. You can't provide security for that as a male in Afghanistan. You can as a woman, because
so women are better at organizing women at a voting booth in the military.
No, they're better given that cultural setting in doing searches for suicide vests.
How?
Because if a man tries to do it, they'll be shot.
What? So in the context of Afghanistan, why would a man be shot for doing that?
You know the answer, right? It's the cultural mores. Only
because the man can't touch a woman. What?
That's right.
So then, but why would he? Who would shoot him?
The Taliban. I mean, do we need to explain?
Oh, so you're talking about the Afghani military.
Such a boomer.
Sorry, what was that?
So you're talking about the Afghani?
No,
you're talking about the Afghani military.
Was that a question, Jim Bob?
No, I just called you a boomer.
Okay.
A boomer. So you're talking about the Afghani military.
No, I'm talking about the U.S. military. We have plenty of.
So the U.S. military are going to shoot each other?
No. Not the Afghan military. The insurgents in Afghanistan would shoot the U.S. But I can give you other examples of
what kind of an incompetent military would allow them their soldiers to get shot in that situation. Wouldn't you protect them from that?
I don't know. It happens all the time. It doesn't mean the U.S. military is incompetent.
So what? You've got some jihadis standing over them, watching the vest being searched. I'm confused.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It's called a green on blue. And if you provoke the cultural sensibilities in that area, there are flare-ups, even within supposed friendlies. But there are plenty of other examples of jobs that women are better at, right? I just gave you one of them, but there are plenty of other examples of jobs that women are better at. And what feminism does is it introduces that hierarchy of merit. Just invented that term trying to answer Jim Bob's question, but it's a hierarchy of merit that allows the best people in a society to do those jobs. And sometimes they are women.
How does feminism do that?
But the hierarchy of merit is always going to require males to enforce this hierarchy.
That's a supposition I don't buy into at all. I mean,
how many Navy SEALs are women?
You'd be surprised at how many women serve alongside Navy SEALs that don't get to be called Navy SEAls.
That's not what he asked.
Look, you're playing semantics because for all intents and purposes, there are women in the SEAL teams that you've never heard of.
Answer the question.
I don't know
how many Navy SEAls are women.
There are women serving in SEAL teams right now.
The answer is zero.
That's not true. That they couldn't do their mission without those women.
That's
just because you don't know about it doesn't make it not
you don't know about it either. You're just making it up. You're literally making shit up.
No, I'm not. Read Ashley's War. Read Ashley's War about a woman who served with the Navy SEAls in Afghanistan.
As a Navy SEAL? As a Navy SEAL?
Question. Who here
served alongside Navy SEals doing everything they did.
Can I just
doing, why are you playing these words?
Right?
Can I just say just quickly? The point was that I said that there was a hierarchy and that the male enforcement is required in that hierarchy. You said you don't accept my presupposition. I said how many Navy SEAls are women? The answer is zero. So therefore, that is a merit-based system. That is a merit-based system, and the males are required to do that because the women can't meet the merit-based criteria.
women serve with Navy SEALs meeting those criteria.
They probably make them
For
sandwiches.
legal reasons, they're not allowed to be called Navy SEAls. So it becomes a word game.
Wait, no. You're saying that women actually meet the testing standards that are current for men, Navy SEAls, but they just don't call them that for some cultural reason? Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Oh,
It's illegal
really?
for women to be Navy SEAls. That is a legal restriction, not a merit-based restriction.
Really? Because they can
Yes,
pass those
really.
tests?
Have you
You
served
know,
the military?
I
Jim?
wish we had a Navy person on this debate to be able to answer this for
Yeah,
us.
anyone would be better than you.
Well, he's
That
at
seems
least
that
served in the
common.
military, right? You're like talking to a vet. So it's
Who
just
cares?
to be clear, like I'm just a little surprised by the level of disrespect.
That's amazing. You're surprised. That's a cool emotion. That's a great emotion to have. It
All
has
right,
nothing
Jim
to do with an
Bob, enough.
argument, Sadie.
My time. You know, it's my
What
time.
do you
as a
mean
woman.
enough?
Well, you've had a lot of
Jim
emotions.
Bob.
Literally doing emotional, like, this is what
Red.
women do. That's all you got is like, I'm going to tone police and I'm going to be really surprised about
And
stuff.
then throw your
and
questions on
I can't
GDP.
believe you threw your Legos. Like, this is
Explain
like,
what debt
be a
does.
mom. Go be a mom. You could be better
Explain
used.
how empowerment works. Yep.
You're better used as a mom.
Jake,
So-
did you have another?
Have either of you guys served in the military? Or is it just Ken?
No, but it's collectively men. It doesn't matter. That's not
But you
even
did
relevant
serve
to our
in the
argument.
military.
Well, the
Yeah,
military
it's just not even.
has
It's
to
just
be
not a
collectively
good
men.
point.
Well, I'm just establishing that fact.
That it's
Yeah, I mean, it's just not a good
collectively
point
men.
though. It's like me arguing. It's like me
Yes.
arguing with an American. It's like me arguing with an American about politics, and then them saying to me, "Well, are you American? Are you American? Do you live in America?"
Yeah, it's just
And it doesn't
fallacious
matter
and
because
dumb.
we can just look at the facts. It's just not a good
I
argument.
guess the larger point, Jake, is that you're claiming to be an expert on something and dismissing
When
the
did I
actual
claim that?
expert in the room.
What? You're just a liar. When did he
When
claim
did
to
I?
be an
When did I
expert?
claim that?
Well, you're asserting these things about the Navy SEAls as if they're
When did he
true,
claim
and
to
then
be
when
an
you're
expert?
faced with actual facts, you move right on and pretend that 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 you
I
know
haven't
what you're
heard the
talking
facts.
about.
Maybe I missed that part. Maybe I missed the facts
I heard
part.
the anecdotal stories about women moving bags at the airport, but we didn't hear any actual arguments from you guys.
Jim Bob.
Never
super
claimed to
curious,
be an expert.
Have you been a police officer before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, so how come
How's that
men
relevant,
your
sweetie?
obligations
Hey,
as
sweetie,
men?
how's that relevant to your
Oh,
argument
I'm
that
just curious-
feminism is
I'm
good for
just
society?
curious- Well, I'm curious what your reasons would be for not meeting that obligation.
Could you tie this into why feminism is good for society, sweetie?
Well, we can go back if you want to talk about GDP again, but I know that that one's a really spooky topic.
No. Just in general, how is your questioning of whether or not I've ever been a police officer relevant to your affirmative
shocked
that
that-
no,
I'm just shocked you have to dither on it. I figured I would get a
What?
straight answer really
you
clearly. You
mean?
were big about obligations.
why
and
would
men's
I be
obligations.
why would that be relevant?
Why would lots of the stuff that you've brought up be relevant?
Why
But
would lots
I
of
was
stuff
curious.
be relevant to me not answering the
I
question why
thought
it's
you could answer
relevant?
questions. You know, you've been dogging on me.
No,
for
I'm
not
not a
answering
police
questions. You
officer,
can
nor
answer
did I ever set myself on the path. How is it relevant now?
I'm just wondering why you haven't fulfilled your obligations as a man to being a police
No one
officer
said the
or a
obligation is
military
become a police officer, silly.
or military. You've got to be the arm of enforcement, right?
No one
your
argued that you
obligation?
have an obligation to join the military.
Oh, so men don't have an obligation to join the military.
No, the men as a collective, not as individuals. As a collective, it's required that men, if they want an ordered society, there has to be an obligation for men to fulfill their obligations as the arm of force. Otherwise, you don't, hold on. Otherwise, you don't have an ordered society. Now, feminism doesn't have any obligations.
So other men have the obligation, but you don't have the obligation.
The ones who
And they do that as well.
I haven't look here. I'll demonstrate this.
I respect our
Not to
vets,
erudite.
police officers. I
Look,
think it's great.
look,
I'm just curious why Jim Bob
I'm-
isn't fulfilling his
I have
obligation.
an obligation to conceal carry.
You have an obligation to conceal carry.
Yes.
Why? Where does
From
that
my
obligation come from?
From my work, from my view, I have an obligation to protect myself and my family. And my house is a mini state. And this is a great point, actually. I'm glad you asked it, because from a feminist view, you guys have no obligation of what the home is or isn't, right? From my view, my home is actually an extension of what I'm arguing for the state, which is a patriarchal system. So even if I'm not a cop, even if I'm not a priest, I'm a priest of my home and I'm a cop of my home. The home is a patriarchal system. From your view, and Ken here, who knows, he probably votes with his wife who's gonna get the say every week, every other week, who gets the man pants, right? From our view, it's more effective for the men to lead both in and outside of the home. So when you ask, not so erudite, are you a police officer? I'm a police officer of my home. Are you a priest? I'm a priest of my home. Are
In
you
the
a
way that
leader?
women are
I'm a
made
leader
seals
of my home.
I get
You
you.
have no leadership. you and Ken have zero obligations for any sort of ordered system to be patriarchal, yet you rely wholly on patriarchal systems to
We have
argue
all
your
sorts of
little
obligations that we
silly
establish. We talked
positions.
about the social contract. So I guess the reason why I'm bringing this up is if men are not obligated to join the military, as you yourself said, but
Red
some
herring.
men do, then men are not the enforcement arm. Soldiers
That's
and
not even,
police
that doesn't
officers
even
are.
follow. What's wrong with your brain? You shouldn't even get a vote.
Say
You
it
just
again.
said because all men don't join the military, there's no, that means that the military isn't predominantly men. That's actually
That's
false.
not what I said. That's not
Yeah,
what
it
I said.
is. Say it again.
Okay.
See if you can do it
men are
again.
not obligated, I wrote it down just for you. If men are not obligated to join the military, but some men do, then men are not the enforcement arm. Soldiers are.
That doesn't
and police
follow.
officers are.
No,
Of course.
if there
course.
if there is an enforcement arm at all, that's useful and effective, it's predominantly men, and you can't give me any sort of counter to that.
I've never ever been offered to. The issue is that it's not men that are the enforcement arm.
It
It's
is
soldiers.
men predominantly who are the enforcement arm.
That
Both
doesn't
Ken
matter.
agrees.
That
Tell me
doesn't
when.
matter.
Tell me where there's an enforcement arm, erudite, where it's predominantly women, please.
I don't need to.
You just made the claim.
I did never make the claim. I said if
What
men
did
are
you
not
just say?
obligated, I'll say it again. If men are not obligated to join the military, but some men do, then men are not the enforcement arm. Soldiers and police officers are the enforcement arm.
What?
Predominant
No, they're
is-
men.
Predominant
Collectively, they're
isn't
men, silly.
operative in this
What
discussion.
are they collectively men? Man is a status of sex, right? It doesn't follow that because the predominant
Patriarchy doesn't
hold on,
mean
dude.
men
Hold
are
on, lady.
most
Hold on,
soldiers.
lady.
That's not what patriarchy
Because,
means.
lady, because the predominant sex in the military, in the enforcement arm of a society is men, it doesn't follow that because some men aren't in that role, that it's not predominantly men. What is wrong with your brain?
Because predominant isn't an operative in this discussion. Nobody's disagreed about predominant. What we're
So
talking
then you
about,
agree. You just contradict
No.
yourself.
No, because you said that a patriarchy is that men are the enforcement arm of the patriarchy. However, men are not obligated to join the military, but some men do. Then men are not the enforcement arm. Soldiers are
Who
the
cares? I
enforcement
think
arm.
they should. I think they should be obligated to join the military. So what?
Then why didn't
Doesn't
you?
it doesn't it's not anything against my point. The point is, and this is something you guys can't really grapple with, is if a bunch of men want to take the rights of anybody else, right? If a collective of men want to do that, they can do that. If a collective of women want to do that, they can't. Silence.
I'm unsure how to explain to you more clearly that your definition of patriarchy is.
What did I just say? I didn't talk about definitions. What did I just say, Eurydice?
You lost your own point.
Do you disagree with what I just said?
No. So,
Okay, great.
hold on.
So if you don't disagree with what I just said, and I'll say it again for the audience, a collective of men could get together and completely wither away your so-called rights to vote and your loud mouth and everything you had that comes with you, okay? They could just do that, right? But a collective of
Soldiers
women,
could, yeah.
but a collective of women couldn't.
So
The
what,
main
Jim?
thing- The
So
main
what
thing
that
that's
means,
important
that
here,
means
So what?
what?
I guess I'll explain it to your chat, is that Jim Bob has conceded his main point, which is that
What's
men
that?
aren't the enforcement arm. It's soldiers that are the enforcement arm.
Who
And
are
patriarchy-
men?
A patriarchy
are
is
men?
No,
What?
it's dominantly men. That's not part of the contention.
It's not men, it's soldiers.
It's not men that are
It's
the
not-
enforcement arm.
It's not men, it's
soldiers, which
basketball
you've agreed.
players.
No,
Wow.
it's soldiers, actually.
finish.
It's soldiers and military.
Michael Jordan's
officers,
not a
right?
man. He's a basketball player. Nice argument.
Again, soldiers. I know you can keep up, Jim Bob.
Male.
Yeah, but Jim
soldier.
Bob also made the argument that within his home he also has duties, and his duties are to protect his home and to protect his family. So these are duties that extend outside of the military. It's not all just about military and police officers.
Well, for your definition of patriarchy, you're talking about the enforcement arm, which is about soldiers
Yep.
and police officers.
That goes to the home as well.
It goes to the home too.
The
That's why
patriarchal
we're
structure.
advocates-
The
That's why we're
enforcement-
advocates for the family, and feminism is not.
Is patriarchy a hierarchical system of organizing a society?
Yes, it's the only one. It's the only possible one.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So
sure.
if it's a system of organization of a society, you already said
Starts at the
part
home.
of the foundations, no, part of the foundations of a society is law enforcement, right? Law and structure.
Yeah, that's the second premise of my argument you guys couldn't engage with. Yes, go on.
Okay. So if men aren't the enforcement arm, it's soldiers and police officers, and not all soldiers are men, you've already sacrificed your definition of patriarchy.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
No, I just want to clarify what Erudite is trying to do here. So she says, because the enforcement arm is made of
police officer doesn't count, just like apparently Navy SEAL women don't count.
Hold on a second. I know you want to try to take back your shitty argument, but let's give it back to the audience, okay? She said, because the enforcement arm is made up of soldiers who are predominantly male, it doesn't follow that the enforcement arm is predominantly male. That's literally what she said.
That's
just
not
a
what
summary.
I again wrote it down. I can read it to you again, but we should probably move. I understand that you just cannot either follow. I don't understand. Just like
you're roboting. Is she roboting for anyone else?
No.
Nope, just you. I've already said a few times, we can move on. Do you guys want to deal with the GDP point? Because you guys still haven't tackled that yet. So again, if your definition of patriarchy is that men are the enforcement arm, but men don't have to be soldiers and not all soldiers are men, then men are not the enforcement arm. Soldiers and police officers are. The predominant claim has nothing to do with it.
What are the sex of the predominant officers and soldiers?
Nobody's fought on that the entire time.
So what the hell are you saying?
The enforcement arm.
Are you having an aneurysm?
I guess I don't know what to tell you other than maybe if you go back to your Andrew Wilson Debate University, they can walk you through how premises work.
Yeah, you got nothing. More ad hom. That's it. All you said is they're not men. They're people in uniforms.
I've walked you through the argumentation multiple times. I understand you don't get it.
Let's see if you guys can look. I agree with a couple of your premises here. A good society requires law and order. Law and order requires the enforcement of men, or what you call soldiers or police officers, right? It's the uniforms that make it, not the men, not the brute force, right? It's not the actual muscle and bone thickness and aggression of men. It's just the uniform, right? Okay. Premise 3, a society that requires the force of men is patriarchal because ultimately the patriarchy, the collection of men, Erudite and Ken, could at any moment, tell me if you disagree with this, at any moment a collection of men in a society can take over and remove your so-called rights. Yes or no?
So what? Like, that doesn't mean
feminism
is bad for society.
Hey, Ken, can you answer the question or not?
The argument is feminism bad for society? And it's
is it good? No, is it good for society?
The argument is feminism is good for society, which it is, because in every society where it's been able to take root, it's made those societies better.
That's just an assertion. Why don't you just assert your opening statement again without arguing it?
No. I've cited the OECD studies, the McKinsey studies. Innovation increases, GDP increases across every metric. Society does better economically in terms of security, innovation, when feminism is allowed to take root.
And then you guys get to pick and choose what types of feminist messaging you don't assign yourself to, right? Ambiguity.
Yeah, I get to define feminism.
Yeah, you get to just say, well, that feminist isn't real feminism. Like, but the point is,
redefining patriarchy to just be your own thing.
No, patriarchy is a system of a top-down system that at the top there are men, and that's exactly the society you live in.
Right, but you've also redefined it as men are the enforcement arm, which is
that's included in a patriarchy. Otherwise, what are you talking about?
No, because there's lots of patriarchies, for example, that might just have exclusively slaves, men, women, children.
That would require force of men, dummy. How do you hold slaves without the force of men, Erudite?
You can withhold their food. You control their mobility.
With force?
What?
With force or just with words?
With force eventually, but you can also do it by
withholding. Yeah, cool. Thanks for proving my point.
Next structures.
Try again.
I don't actually think this argument is nearly as strong as you feel that it is. I understand that
I don't care about your feelings. I don't care about your thoughts. You just got roasted. Move on to the next argument.
I'm talking about your feelings, Jim Bob.
So can you keep slaves without force?
No, of course not.
Okay, cool. So that's a point in my direction. Would you like to move on to the next argument, Eurida?
Sure. Do you want to engage with GDP now?
No. Who cares about the GDP if there's no humans? Why care about the GDP if feminism doesn't have an obligation to reproduce?
Again, we're going back.
I don't know. GDP good. GDP good sounds good.
You're going to be okay. If we go back to the obligation argument, you've already established that there are lots of things that men and women are not obligated to. Men are not obligated to be police officers or soldiers. Women are not obligated to reproduce. This has nothing to do with feminism and everything to do with, no, it has everything to do with a liberal democracy. We don't obligate people to do multiple things, including—
Can a liberal democracy outlaw women voting?
Yeah, it could be voted for.
Is there an obligation to not outlaw women voting from a feminist view?
It would be opposed to a feminist view. I wouldn't say something.
Yeah, but there's no obligation. It could if you're really arguing for democracy, couldn't it be the case that we just vote out your power to vote?
Yes, you could vote out our power
Cool.
to vote.
So is that what's better for society, to have a system that you can vote out your power?
Yeah, I think democracy is better. And I think most societies that have democracy tend to give people the right to vote because in general, having greater levels of freedom of choice and opportunity amongst all citizens leads to better GDP, which leads to better flourishing for the society.
Well, by society, you mean the people who aren't producing more people, right?
By society, I mean everyone who's a citizen within a nation.
Who exists, right? But then they die, and then what are you left with? Nothing, right?
Well, hopefully children are happening too.
Well, hopefully, but there's no obligation under feminism. So it's under feminism. That's not a good
anywhere, right? You're,
well,
like,
no,
which government do you want to wreck that's forcing women to have children?
Lady, chill. So under feminism, you admitted that there is no obligation to reproduce. So in that regard,
under your system, is there an obligation to reproduce?
Yes, Christian patriarchy.
How are you going to force that?
Enforce it? It's. I didn't say it had to be enforced.
Well, it's an obligation. So if you don't do it,
it's never been enforced throughout history.
You can shame the shit out of people.
And I agree, it's never been enforced.
Did you wear? You probably wore a mask for like 19 months just from shame, right?
Nope. Do you want to answer my question, or do you want to run away with COVID talks?
I just answered your question, right? I just showed you.
How do you force women in your society that are obliged to have children?
Social pressure and propaganda.
What if they won't do it? What if they refuse?
Then fine, it'll work for the most part. The propaganda will work.
If it's an obligation, it must be forced. That's the point of an obligation.
That doesn't follow.
You have an obligation to your country to not murder your fellows. If you
No. You have an obligation, just like Jim Bob has an obligation to protect his home and his family. But if he decided that he was going to be a coward when the intruder breaks in, then he doesn't have to do that. But there would be unbelievable social pressure that would call him a coward. And the social pressure and the feeling of obligation toward his family would make him want to do that. Would make him want to step in between the intruder.
That's right.
An obligation must be enforceable, or it's not an obligation.
He just gave you an example, right, of an obligation to defend your home. If it's failed, you don't get charged for failing to defend your home. Correct?
That's because it's not an obligation to protect your home. It's something we think is good to do.
Okay. So do you have an obligation to vote?
You don't have an obligation to vote, but it is a good thing to do.
Is an obligation basically a deontological statement, not a lawful statement?
What?
Is an obligation a deontological statement and not a lawful or a legal statement?
I guess I would ask you guys. You guys have been the one using obligation.
You're going to ask me the answer. Okay, this is just a trend.
What I'm using it for is something legal. You are obliged as a citizen.
You have an obligation to be a good parent.
So, okay, one obligation. No, you don't. But actually,
you don't have go feminism. My point exactly.
This isn't a point of feminism.
My point exactly. You just heard her. Her worldview. Listen.
Hold on,
she
Jim.
Just said
it. Can I answer the question? Or
you have no obligation to be a good mom. That's feminism.
Really excited. So you do have an obligation to not be an abusive parent, because then we would arrest you and put you in jail.
No,
right?
that's just follow the law.
When we're talking, laws are the obligations that you have. This is why if you're drafted, you were obliged to go to war. This is why IDF soldiers
who goes to war? Wait. Are women obliged to enter the draft?
No. Service? No, they're not. Nobody is obliged.
Okay, so men are. So is that feminism or what?
I don't know why you're pivoting here. Do you want to actually engage?
Pivoting. That's ironic. That's ironic, right? You actually accuse someone of pivoting while you pivot, right? As the pivot. That's really great.
Well, we were talking about obligations, and now you're being oh God, I got lost in the obligation argument. So
you just said you have an obligation.
I know, the draft, because she said the word draft. So I'll just jump there rather than have to engage with her obligation talking points.
Destina, calm down. So look, what just happened is You just made a statement about an obligation inside a military context, and I gave you an example of how men are obligated through law to be drafted and women aren't.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because we have a patriarchal history where we believe that men should go to war and women shouldn't.
And why is that?
Because men are better frontline workers, and we didn't believe that women could do the works of infantry. However, you could ask Ken. My understanding is a lot of that has been minimized over the years with technology.
Yeah.
Do you want to engage with the obligated talking point? Should we go back there? Because I know
we already refuted your talking point because you said because you said an obligation assumes a legal consequence, and Jake and myself both gave examples, right? Self-defense in the home is one, and being a good and being a,
if it's not enforceable, it's not an obligation.
That's a win. That's a win in our direction because you're just arguing from a feminist view. That's not an obligation to be a good parent.
Okay, there's an obligation as a parent. And a core value to be a good parent. An obligation is to not be an abusive or neglectful parent.
How does feminism produce an obligation to be a good parent?
Because if you want to empower women and have a better society for women, you want to have good children that have respect for law and respect for others and therefore respect one another.
Yeah, but what gives you the obligation? A feminist could actually reject that and be still a feminist, right?
At this point, Jim Bob, you need to define obligation because it seems like you're using the word in a way that nobody else is. Because when I say obligation and everyone else says it, they mean enforceable.
Obligation being something you're pressured or compelled to do by a social standard or social norms, right? From a theological view, even. For example, for a Christian, you have certain duties and obligations. They're set out, and you actually have other Christians call you out if you're failing that, right? Inside of your church. So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Sorry, I was distracted by the
Okay. Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing if a group of people share values and obligations and they can call each other out on the failures of those obligations, even if it's outside of a legal framework?
Sure, if we're using obligations.
Cool. Does feminism have that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the obligation feminism has that you can call out another person who self-proclaims to be feminist, and you can say you're being a bad feminist? That's equal to a Christian saying you're not being consistent with your values and duties. What's one example of that?
Okay, within the feminist group, most feminists would call one another out, for example, for attacking other women's looks. In general, there's a pretty core value, which is essentially what you're using instead of you saying obligation, but you mean value. One of the core values, for example, is like not objectifying women, not reducing them to their looks. So when other women call each other out or insult each other on their looks, almost all feminists will jump down the girl who's insulting the looks throat because it's a pretty core value, for example, within feminism, not to do that.
And that's policed how?
How is anything else policed?
Why do you ask a question? Because you're caught in a
Socrates debates.
Listen,
can be Socratic.
Have you not heard of? Look, lady.
Well,
you just said
not a debater. I can respond.
You just refuted yourself because just 10 minutes ago you said an obligation has to be tied to legality, and yet you just presented a social obligation inside feminism that doesn't include going to jail for making fun of someone's fat ass, right?
Okay, you're okay.
But it has social shame.
Unbelievable. This chick is like, you're okay. And she's like, I'm not getting defeated in real time. You're okay.
Can I talk now? Am I allowed?
No, you just refuted yourself. Yeah, you can't talk. So what you did is you just contradicted yourself.
Can I talk? Or
no, I just told you can't talk. Didn't you hear me? So look, what you just did is you contradicted. You just contradicted yourself because you said yes. Premise one, an obligation has to be tied to a legal thing. Then in premise two, you just stated when you're pressed on obligations inside feminism, you just said it's an obligation to not fat shame and make fun of people's bodies. Do you go to jail for that, Eurodite?
So do you want to use my definition of obligation?
So you're not going to answer the question. Yeah.
Do you want to use my definition?
I mean, this is what it's been like all night. No answering the question.
I've answered you consistently. You asked about GDP.
I asked if you go to jail if you make fun of someone's fat ass.
You don't go to jail, but again,
that's all I needed to know.
The definition of obligations to value system, which is what I started using. Do you go to jail if you don't defend your wife?
What?
You go to jail if you cheat on your wife?
No, that's in favor of my position, not yours.
Those are obligations, but they're not enforceable obligations.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's your definition.
That's not yours. You're just borrowing our definitions now, because you got roasted on yours.
Okay, good job.
Does
That's a good
just
job.
I'm so
just
sorry. And sorry, Jake, that this was your part. Unfortunate, but
Oh, wow.
I'm
More
thrilled
nonsense,
about it.
non-argument.
oh no, she's being
I
mean now. Uh-oh.
That's not mean. You can't.
I
You don't have the
wanted
capability of being mean. You have to be
to
logical to be mean.
I wanted to ask if Jake and Ken wanted to jump in here since the time, between.
Yeah, I think that it's an interest. I'm actually really enjoying the back and forth, to be honest. But what we're saying is that feminism is not good for society because feminism has no obligations for women as to what is going to make society healthy. What Jim Bob is talking about here is the obligations that men do have in society, and one of those obligations is to be the enforcement arm of society. So being in the military and being the police and being the protectors in their family, for example. And this is actually something that by and large men do. And with feminism and the introduction of feminism, women are actually doing what the feminists say they should do, which is have no obligations to rear children. And this is why we have a falling birth rate. So this is just a W for our position that feminism doesn't have any obligations or duties in society. And that's why it's destructive and corrosive.
So again, I feel like you guys forgot, you have swapped obligation back and forth between values and enforceable obligations. You have to just pick one. You can't use it for both. That's a Mott and Bailey, right? So
Laws and obligations aren't the same.
Bob, pause. It's okay. You let it turn.
Laws and obligations are not the same. That was your argument.
So your initial argument was that obligations are enforceable. Then once you realize that you have a whole bunch of obligations that are actually value systems and are not enforceable, you pivoted it, right?
I didn't say that. You're such a liar. I said obligations are not enforced by legality. You said they were. We refuted you. Are you this demonic? Like you literally are projecting the complete opposite of what just happened.
Now and agree with me.
Did you not just say that obligations had to be legally bound? You said that, not us.
I asked you if that's how you were using obligations.
No, you said it. You said obligations make no sense unless they're legally bound. That's what you said.
Okay. So for those who are
Which
listening
lady?
who are semi-good faith, the debate of this entire conversation was about not if feminism has obligations. It was whether feminism was good for society. Our main argument is that feminism is good for society because it creates a competition of innovation and allows for a
Ben
better
Shapiro.
meritocracy. Most soldiers are men is not a refutation of that point. So I assume that you don't disagree and have conceded the debate. I really appreciate you guys for coming out. I
Wow.
appreciate you guys
Wow.
agreeing
Way
that
to
feminism
announce
is
your
good
own
for society.
victory. That's
I
hilarious.
appreciate that you guys think that the GDP is improved by women.
That's
being a
cute.
part of
When
it.
are you going to be a mother? That's the only thing that matters here.
When are you going to join the military?
I don't need to join the military because the military is collectively men, right? And I'm the military of my household. So I already joined the military of my household. You, however, didn't do the duties of your household, right? You don't even have a household.
You don't know
What is
anything about me, but go for it.
Yeah. So what's your obligation as a feminist to society right now as an individual level?
There's never been a part of this debate where feminism must have obligations was a part
Yes,
of any of
yes, it does.
It's
Yeah.
our belief. That might be your viewpoint.
No, I'll tell you right now.
Our affirmative viewpoint that we started from, I don't know why you need to be so cowardly. Okay, relax.
I'll
Just
give you the
listen.
argument right now, which you guys can't
My
refute.
starting argument, it's written down here. Feminism is good for society, yes, because it is the morally right thing to do. It's good for innovation. It's good
Morally
for productivity
right?
and the GDP, and it is those things lead to flourishing.
Wait, how is
our
feminism in
affirmative
action?
statements. At no point in any of our affirmative statements do we say feminism must have obligations. That is your affirmative claim that you have to prove.
You
have to
said
prove that feminism
no.
requires obligations.
You actually offered your own obligations under feminism. You're contradicting yourself all night here.
You used
So
value systems
is it
because you were swapping the word
does it
obligations for value
all right?
systems.
Does a good society require law and order?
Yes.
Does feminism have an obligation to perform law and order?
This is
No.
this is an empty question.
No, yeah,
That was
you
a
mean
damning
your mind
question
is
is what it
empty.
was.
You mean your mind is empty.
No, it's because you don't even know what obligation means.
If a good society requires law and order, and feminism doesn't provide an obligation for law and order or any sort of participation in law and order, by the way, it doesn't. Why? As we've said a million times, which produced a number of silent moments in the debate.
Feminism
by the way,
doesn't run society. We're not required to solve all of society.
but
You're
you
trying to
rely
fight-
on society to be run, don't you?
That has nothing to do with anything
Yes,
about
it
is
does.
feminism.
Feminism is a luxury.
Stop. Jim
It's a
Bob,
low
our
degree.
affirmative argument that you need to tackle is feminism is good for society. You
Yeah, and you
establishing other things that are good for society isn't really a problem. Feminism
You
doesn't
said
run
feminism is
society.
neutral.
I said it's good
You
for
said it's
society.
neutral.
I
No,
said
now
it's
you're lying.
good.
No, we can call back the tape. You said it's
I
neutral.
would love to call back the tape. Of course, the answer to the starting question of the debate is feminism good for society was yes. Sarah can affirm that.
You
because
said
we agreed
you
on the
said
topic. Sarah,
no.
did I agree to this topic to take the affirmative
You
position?
said a feminism is good for the you said feminism is good for the GDP. You haven't extrapolated how the GDP reaching any sort of number is good for the long term of society. Jake and I are arguing for foundational views, which you guys have none. If the GDP, again, I'll say it, if the GDP was at an exquisite position and you had a fucking golden light on it and you shot it into the sky like the Batman symbol, if there were no families, if there was no cohesive society with a set of values and customs and norms for it to reflect on, it's useless.
What does GDP mean, Jim Bob?
Gross domestic product.
What is it though? Like, what does it mean?
I'm actually not entirely sure how they extrapolate.
It's how much
what
you
it's actually
produce, how
called.
much you produce as a society, pretty much.
Yeah, and what do we use it to establish about a society? Do you broadly know?
No, go ahead and
Well,
tell
it
us.
can be used to just establish the wealth of a society.
The wealth, but typically also people
Productivity.
use it. Yeah, productivity and health of a society, right?
Health?
The total
What do you-
monetary.
whoa. Health?
Yes, so the total
Wait a
monetary.
second. Hold on a second. I just want to stop there. No, 1 point at a time, Erudite. Are you meaning physical health or what?
Okay.
What do you mean by health? I have to know.
So GDP is a measure of goods and services produced within a country, right?
So if a country was legalized mass scale cocaine and heroin, as long as it increased the GDP, you'd argue that's good for the society?
It's a decent heuristic to measure how
So it didn't matter what they're doing, right? It could be like a a prostitution ring that was legal in a certain island, and the prostitution,
Yeah, it's not a
it
moral
actually.
claim.
Hold
GDP is not a-
hold on. Well, the question is it good for society? It's totally fair to ask, Erudite. If a society has a really high GDP, being that that's your metric for good, right? If they produce a high GDP, but they're doing horrific, if they're doing horrific things, is it still good for society?
Yeah, I would argue that.
Yeah. Sex trafficking and all the rest, right? Feminism,
Yeah, that
folks.
would be if there was a world where there was a country that had a sex trafficking ring market and it had high GDP, I would agree
That's good
with
for
you that
society.
Well, I mean, you
moral
kind of you do have this in a way, though, Erudite,
Amazing.
because China has one of the highest GDP. China has the second highest GDP in the world, and China is not a place that you would want to live, I'm assuming.
I agree, but I never said that GDP equals morality. I said that it is about country strength and it's good
is-
So
for
GDP
society.
doesn't equal good.
GDP doesn't equal moral good. It equals strength.
So you're not making a meta-ethical position of what's good for society. You're just saying what's pragmatic. Is that what it is? We're just finding this out now?
Yeah, we're talking about what is good for society, and typically when we're talking about that, we're talking about what benefits the
Benefits
nations.
based on their arbitrary goals?
For example, if you are a country with low GDP and you're forced up against China, they're going to stomp you, which means their bad moral system might get all over your stuff. So if you're a country
But they're
that you
good.
broadly like your moral system, you want to have a strong GDP to help compete.
So what's more important, the moral system of the society or the GDP from a feminist view?
From a feminist view?
Yeah, that's the one you're fucking debating tonight.
Sure, being able to defend yourself is good. Yes.
I didn't say about defending yourself. I said what's
GDP allows for. If you have a
unbelievable, dude.
stronger GDP, you can
Unbelievable. This
defend
is like a
yourself better.
real life
Okay.
witch we have here. So the question was, what's more important? You're a duh. The high GDP or the morality of the people?
Broadly, I value the morality of the people, but if you can't defend
Great.
yourself, I've never said GDP is morally good. But if you are
So then-
decently, I think America's broadly morally good. There's some problems in it, but I like the precepts of America. If we don't have a high GDP, we can't defend ourselves. We need
So,
the ability
Erudite.
to protect ourselves, right? Which GDP.
But
is
Erudite,
good
you're
for.
saying that the problem is that that China could stomp you out or whatever. So you're actually saying that the important thing here in your view is that you have a strong military, and you have a strong military that's going to be made up of men in order to be able to defend your society. That's what you're really saying. Because the GDP allows you to have a strong military.
Is a strong enforcement arm a moral good?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, so GDP then, by your logic, is good morally because it allows you. To
But how does that relate though?
Because you just said that a strong enforcement arm is good, and GDP allows you to have a strong enforcement arm. That's how you protect yourself in large part, is through soft and whatnot.
Okay.
You need a high GDP.
But how does that make
military? So I guess
sure, how does that
GDP,
make feminism good for society?
because feminism allows women to enter the workforce, which increases your GDP, which is good for society. So
Yeah,
I
but you
guess
can
by
have a
that-
yeah, but
your
you're
own
you
logic,
can,
Jim,
you're
pause.
right.
Jim,
You don't
pause.
understand the shit
By
you're in
your
right
logic,
now.
Jake, by your own logic, Jake, feminism, at least in how it benefits GDP, is a moral good because it creates a stronger.
Yeah,
No, 'cause-
China has a high GDP. China has a high GDP and a strong military.
Yeah, is that good? Could they go
China,
against?
yeah.
Right, but you can have that without feminism. So the feminism
I
isn't
guess-
adding anything new.
So do you guys not think? Well, feminism, the
But
part
you're-
of feminism
you're-
that I
but you're-
think China has, right? Because
It's
women
over.
are allowed
Erudite.
to be in the workforce. in
Erudite,
China.
your example just isn't relevant though, because you're trying to piece together things that don't necessarily need to be together. So, for example, Iran has proxies all over the Middle East. You'd say that they have a strong military. Are they a feminist country?
They have a much weaker military than us. I would not say they have a particularly strong military.
But relative to their size though, for their size and for their GDP, etc., they have a strong military. They have proxies all over the Middle East. They have a lot of influence, but they're not the biggest country. They don't have the biggest GDP. They don't have the biggest GDP, and they're not a feminist country. But they have a pretty strong military.
It's a
they have
defeater to your.
My
It's a
understanding
defeater
is
to your
Iran has
position.
Okay-ish. It's got a lot of old technology. It definitely doesn't.
Why
seem to
haven't
be
they
able
been
to
wiped out?
compete with Israel.
Look. It's really simple.
There's a Samson protocol across all the Middle East because they all agree that if they try to wipe out each other, they'll just nuke everyone. Do you not know what the Samson protocol
Erudite,
is?
is it possible to produce a high GDP and completely be anti-feminist?
Not if you don't allow women to enter the workforce.
No.
Climate.
Is it logically possible to produce a high GDP and not adopt any of the feminist views?
Well, are you saying women in the workforce is one of those feminist views?
Well, I mean, women have always been a part of the workforce. There's no moment where suddenly feminism was on the rise and then suddenly people were allowed to work. Women were, even before all of what you call your amazing moments forward in progress, they were still able to work. The question was whether it was more valuable to work or to be mothers of the home. I'm saying on net balance, isn't it possible that any given state or nation state could actually produce a high GDP and be completely antithetical to feminism? The answer is yes. Here's why. You can enslave a bunch of women in a society and they just determine that that's lawful. And you can sell those women to other nations and they deem that's lawful. And they can produce a high GDP and it's completely antithetical to feminism, correct? If that's the case, Erudite, it means that your metric for what feminism is producing as a good isn't peculiar to feminism because anything can produce a high GDP, including horrendous, atrocious behavior.
Well, you
now, would you
guys
like to
argue-
move on? Would you like to move on to a different shitty argument?
Well, you guys made this argument, right? You guys agreed that a strong enforcement. Yeah, I asked Jake, do you think a strong enforcement arm is good, like a moral good? And you said yes.
That
And you
wasn't
said,
an argument. You asked him a question. You made the argument.
No, I asked him, does he think a strong enforcement arm is good?
Well, I think that,
And he
yeah,
said,
and I said yes. I think that a strong enforcement arm of the government is good. Just like in your home, it's good to enforce. Just good to have force in your home and to be able to protect your family. That's a good thing. Just like it's good to be able to protect your nation. But your example that you gave, saying, well, then we must have feminism because feminism allegedly increases GDP, and if you have a high GDP, you have a strong military. I gave you an example of another country, Iran, that has a pretty strong military, and they're doing okay with protecting their people at the moment. They don't have the highest GDP in the world, and they're most certainly not feminist.
I don't know
So
if
what's the
anyone
next?
would
What's the other metric then for feminism producing good stuff if it's not GDP? If we just demonstrated that feminism is
I
GDP.
need to go. In like 5, I'll re-explain my
surprise.
opening statement again to you, and then you're going to have to be on your own with this one. So my argument is that feminism tries to empower women. But one of the ways it empowers women is by allowing them to enter the workforce. My argument is that by inviting women into the workforce, it gives you the ability to compete with other nations' GDP. If you cannot compete with other nations' GDP, you will be crushed because your enforcement arm will be weak. And that would be bad for your society. Also,
what would be
Rachel Wilson,
worse though?
any-
What would be
no,
worse though if you don't have
not-
kids, lady? If you don't have kids for the GDP to benefit, right? Then we
Is that
ask
an
you, and
explicit?
you just turn this into some sort of false dichotomy. No, right now, erudite. If you look across the world, the population is in decline, and there is a necessary component that needs to be implemented through some sort of campaign, marketing, propaganda, and you guys are just oblivious to it. That we need more humans, right? So you keep LARPing and fucking, romanticizing the GDP, and we ask you for what? For what society that doesn't exist? We need women out of the workforce and into homes to produce the human beings that you think the GDP would benefit. Do you understand?
Okay. So you're basically not refuting any of my affirmative claim. That's good.
It's
guess
just
I won.
unbelievable. Unbelievable.
You're just coming up with other
It's
well, the
just
issue is
unbelievable.
You're just non sequitur.
I
You're
would
literally
take
coming
your
up with
vote so fast
other
if I could. With
random. I
just-
know, but the problem
No
is
vote.
that you're kind of a cowardly, weak man who can't.
Yeah, you
control
got
your
no
feelings.
arguments. You
can't
can't
stop
answer anything
interrupting them.
directly.
Well,
You
the
don't
issue
even
is that
deserve a husband. You don't even deserve a family.
Oh, Jim
honestly.
Bob's
Pretty
Jim Bob.
claim
That's
to make.
no.
You
stop
didn't
it.
even earn it.
Hope that
You didn't
you
even earn it.
flourish in your life.
You've earned nothing.
The issue is that you haven't refuted my affirmative claim. You're making other random.
What affirmative claim?
My
what
affirmative
affirmative
claim. I'll read it again to you.
The GDP go uppy up.
Close. What's
Nice.
good about a GDP is that
What's
you
good
can
about it?
have a stronger enforcement arm, which allows you.
You
to
mean
defend
men? You mean men, not women.
So
What the
ridiculous.
hell's wrong with you?
I
Seriously, what's wrong with your
glad that
head?
You guys feel really comfortable in
Stronger
Your...
male enforcement arm to give me the sense of luxury and liberation.
Look, if you have an answer
fuck?
against my affirmative claim that GDP is good and therefore
what?
feminism infusing more women into the workplace is good, go for it. If you want to
If
make
you can
one random
produce
claim,
high
I
GDP
don't
without
have to
feminism,
make
then
all
your
that.
argument is moot, dude.
An
you
army
can
of all men with no money will lose. Ask Hamas.
So erudite. Should we then have a societal enforcement, for example, where women were forced to enter the workforce and they had to do their 12 hours a day of labor in order to make the GDP higher, so that we could then have a stronger military?
Nope. I don't believe in violating rights like that. I'm a liberal Democrat.
Rights that are
Should we
enforced
have
by men.
propaganda, social propaganda, so that women should have to go into the workforce, produce the amount of labor that is good for the state, so that the state can then have a stronger military, so we can crush China?
No, I think that we should. I think we should allow it. Basically, we should allow
But the
women to enter
GDP.
the workforce.
But the GDP,
Yeah,
we should be
value
aiming to get the
rights
GDP up.
My
Yeah, typically
GDP.
women will opt to enter the workforce because having more money is good. But I will allow it. I don't feel the need to force them. I think people will naturally choose towards it anyways.
Is feminism itself, like, because you said rights and stuff, right? But like we pointed out today, pretty clearly, that if a bunch of
We're going
men
down another
wanted,
tangent, Jim Bob, I don't have time
no,
for this.
no, calm down.
Well,
I
if
know.
it's not going to be about
Maybe take
GDP,
one of your pills. I see them in the back. Take one of those.
All right,
So the question is, if men, because you keep saying rights and shit like this, right? Everything you're arguing relies on predominantly a patriarchal system. Feminism is antithetical to patriarchy. So this is what's so bothersome about feminists, including Ken there, right? Who's probably wearing a sports bra. So the question is, anything you say about feminism that's good relies wholly on something that's not actually feminist. And you guys haven't actually dealt with this problem foundationally. Jake and I are going foundation. You guys are going topical. We go to the core and the bricks. You guys go to the siding,
is
right?
allowing
We
women
go.
to enter
We
the
say
workforce feminist.
what? What?
Look,
It's
What are you mumbling about?
At the end of the day, the proof is in the reality of societies that embrace feminism versus those that don't. And I guarantee you,
Damn right.
Jim, Bob, Jake, you wouldn't want to live in any of those societies
Because they're not
that
because
don't
no,
embrace
no.
feminism.
Let's go,
That's the
baby.
one-to-one.
The
No,
the
that's
apples
such a
apples
red
comparison.
herring.
All
That-
right,
That's such a red
Not
herring.
so
By the
erudite
way,
as
we already
spontaneously combusting.
told you, Ken.
Jake,
Does it
literally
follow?
loves us so much.
Ken,
He's just
can I ask you a
Good.
question?
Here's Jim Bob. Ask one last question. Ken,
Ken.
give your last thought, and then we'll move into
Ken.
closing statements, please.
Is it possible for a society to push against feminism and not be Islamicist?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Then shut the fuck up.
I don't understand the point of that. I think
Because your argument was, oh no, Muslims.
absolute-
That's all your argument is, dude.
not at all. The
Yeah,
point
it is.
is societies that have embraced feminism do better across every metric. Ergo, feminism
Really?
is good.
Really?
For
Is that why
society.
the birth rate is so low?
I don't know.
I
what
don't
that
know.
has to
I
do with
don't know. I don't
feminism
know. I
and,
don't know. I don't
and
know.
not improving society.
What is a
if you look
society
at
without children, Ken?
innovation and feminism
Innovation.
allows
What
for
is
having
innovation
children.
without children, Ken?
Feminism allows for having children.
What is-
Name for me a
I didn't say
feminist
it
society
didn't.
that is not having children. It just affords
Les,
women the
listen,
option.
Kendra,
It's like
chill.
you have the option not to join the military. You deserve that choice, right?
Why? No, why?
And
No,
women
why do
have
I
the
do-
option
no.
to have kids or not? That's
No,
what a
why?
feminist society
No,
allows.
why do we deserve that? What are you talking about? We deserve it. Israel. This is what's so funny. This guy Ken starts with IDF. Does IDF have the right to choose not to go to the military, Ken?
Does IDF have the
Like,
right
to
choose?
going
that
in?
question doesn't even
or
make
is
sense.
Israeli?
What do you mean, does IDF have the choice
Ken,
not to
Ken,
join
chill
the
out,
military?
Ken. So, if you're an Israeli citizen, do you have the choice, the feminist choice, to enter the military or not?
If you're Orthodox, yeah, you don't have to.
If you're Orthodox, okay. So, for the
So
most
yes,
part,
the answer to the question is
no,
yes.
for the most part, you're
You asked the
compelled.
question, I answered it
You're such a
as
snake.
directly as I can.
You're such an absolute snake. Look, it's compelled by law to enter the military in
Not if
Israel
you're
for the most
Orthodox.
part. No, I didn't ask for the exception, Ken. I know
said
feminism
it.
relies on the exception for everything. Ken, for the most part, if you're a citizen in Israel, are you compelled by law to enter the military? Yes or
For
no,
the most
Ken?
part, yeah.
Great, thank you. Why did it take so long? You're like a woman.
Well, because that's not the question you asked. I answered the question you asked.
So, no, you were saying, oh, I just want to give people choice. That's feminist. Yet your example for choice is actually not choice. It's actually compelled by government.
My example for choice is actually the U.S. and the feminist society that we've built.
Oh,
that
so
gives
should-
women the option. just
Should
like
they
to
have
give
the
you
option, or should they? No,
Yeah,
no,
they
no,
should have
no,
the
no.
option.
I don't have the option if I'm drafted. Women
Oh,
aren't
thank
drafted.
God I have the choice to shut this bitch down whenever I want. We're going to go ahead and maneuver into closing statements, everyone. Jake, would you like to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I think that this was quite honestly an embarrassment for the feminist point of view. All they really said was the GDP, the graph go up. We gave many examples of when the graph go up isn't necessarily good and why that doesn't even align with feminism. So it was an extremely weak point. We gave certain duties and obligations that people have in society to make a healthy and thriving society to their detriment. The feminists even agreed that these things were good, but they have no obligations to do the things that make the healthy society. And everything that they appealed to required the force of men and required the force doctrine, and the force is enforced by men. So it was a resounding W, and off to Jim Bob.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jim Bob.
Yeah, I agree with Jake here. Complete embarrassment. As far as there's so many contradictions, especially Erudite, who's maybe used to a chat that doesn't call her out on her contradictions. Ken's appeal to look at the ladies at the airport. I mean, this is his argument for the amazing performance of women in the military. When we ask him point blank, if you're going to choose between a collection of men and women to defend you, is it totally equalized? He says, no. I mean, you got to choose the men. Why? Well, because the nature of men and women are different. Because the nature of men or women and different, their actual being is different. Their makeup is different. It follows that their duties are different. From Jake and myself, our position is that feminism actually argues against and tries to invert and try to equalize men and women, trying to blur the lines that men aren't the enforcers and women aren't the caregivers and the baby makers and providers. And we're arguing that a society through a variety of argumentations, including my own and Jake's, we actually basically demonstrated that a society that's good requires these elements. The elements are force. You need force, okay? A good society requires law and order. They admitted law and order requires predominantly the force of men. I don't care about your exceptions where there's some brute chick named Tanya who can pick up the backside of a tank. I don't care. The collective is men. It needs to be men. It's never the collective of women. Premise 3, society requires the force of men. That's called a patriarchy. Now, I know Eurydice didn't like this. She was like, well, you're just conflating that men actually have the say in everything because they have the say in the force. That's not patriarchy. I don't know what it is if it's not patriarchy. If it's the case that a collection of men could take away your silly rights to vote, Eurydice, to vote for your shitty policies, we could actually do that. Guess what? A collection of women couldn't stop it from happening. I call that a patriarchy. Conclusion, a patriarchy is actually necessary for a good or bad society. I'll actually include. Feminism is required for neither. In fact, the only thing that's required of feminism is to make a shitty society where women like to yeet their own kids and get a lanyard to work at Nike and call it a win so they could start a blog.
Just really quickly, Sarah, do you mind if I just add one point to my closing statement? It's something that I just like, especially Ken, to be able to contend with. It's that I can understand when women are feminists. I mean, I think that it's completely the wrong approach to take, but I think that there's something in the natural makeup of women that will go towards it. But Ken, I never understand male feminists, and I have a theory about this. There's a zoological term called the sneaky fucker strategy, right? And this is not me saying, this is actually what it's called. It's called the sneaky fucker strategy. And basically,
I know where you're going.
What will happen is that pufferfish and other animals will actually try and morph into the physiology of the female to try and blend in with them to get past the other males to try and actually mate with the females. So I think that male feminism is something that's designed for beta males to actually go and try and have a mating strategy with females. And I'd like to hear you contend with that. But yeah, I think Not So Erudite was next.
Go ahead, Eurydice. The floor is yours.
Okay, sure. I guess I'll start first and foremost. Rachel Wilson was supposed to be here instead of Jim Bob, but she was had a pretty serious health issue. So I'm hoping genuinely the best for Rachel, and also really wish she was here. I think she can hold her own a fair bit better than Jim Bob, and somehow is like way less emotional and like upsetty spaghetti as Jim Bob. So I really do wish you were here, Rachel. Kind of a missed opportunity, but maybe next time. For response to all of this, by my own opponent's admission, it is a product of feminism that women entered the workforce. Women entering the workforce is required for a competitive GDP. A competitive GDP is required to protect yourself from other countries. Otherwise, other military advancements would result in your destruction. So by my opponent's admission, it's imperative to be able to defend yourself as a country. Therefore, by their own logic, allowing women into the workforce must be good, because without women in the workforce, a nation's GDP will be dwarfed by others. No economist on the planet would disagree with the notion that reducing your workforce by half would allow for a competitive GDP. America is currently in a very difficult predicament wherein China's approaching America's GDP. And if this trend continues and China's GDP is meaningfully surpassing of America's, we will find ourselves in a genuine, unironic global catastrophe. It will be very bad because of their superior GDP. It will make their dollar more valuable, which we have a lot of hegemonic power related to our dollar, and a higher GDP, to be clear, is not inherently good forever, but it must be competitive or you will be destroyed. And I fundamentally believe that an American global hegemon and an America policed dominantly by a globe policed by dominantly American values and American policy is a better globe, which is why we should continue to allow women in the workforce, which is why feminism is good, at least for that specific thing. Not all things are perfectly good and bad. There's lots of bad parts about feminism. We just didn't really get to that. And Jake, I've always found you to be an incredibly good faith debate opponent. So I apologize for making the dick sucking joke at you. That was bad faith of me. And I think you've been—
The technique was actually pretty good, Kyla. I appreciated the technique.
Yeah, as a whore, yeah. Jim Bob, you have a glorious beard that you don't deserve. So
do you want to fight me? I'll physically fight you.
Oh my God.
I will fucking physically fight you if you want.
Oh my God.
You want to?
Oh, you want to
Okay,
assault a woman?
let's
Go for
move.
it.
No, I'm
to-
asking you if you want to fight me.
Children, we have open panel for the fun shit. Ken, would you like to give your closing statements, please?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. This has been a fascinating experience as my first debate in this kind of forum. It's been really fun to watch. Thanks for bringing it, Jake and Jim Bob. Look, I think all you really need to know to appreciate the proposition that feminism makes society better is that Jake and Jim Bob wouldn't be caught dead living in a society that didn't have feminism. We've given example after example after example of places they could go or things they could do if they had the balls to do it. But you know what? Neither of them joined the military. Neither have been to a place like Ukraine or Afghanistan. The societies that have embraced feminism are where they want to live and where they want to raise their families.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. Let's, Jordi, you mentioned you were leaving. Did you want to still?
No, I need to head off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sarah. I really, really appreciate it. It was a good time. And Jim Bob, you look like your victim weight. You should probably work on your shoulders and your wrists.
Do you want to fight me or not?
Look, I love that you're
Jim
You keep
Bob.
talking shit. I will fucking fight you.
Jim
No,
Bob.
I will fight you.
I'm going to fight you because Jesus, Lord, have mercy. You need to fight somebody, and I am willing to step into that place and do it for the grace of everybody else, Jim Bob. Holy fucking shit.
What? I'm just arguing for equality here.
Equal rights, equal lefts, baby.
I love you so much, Jim Bob. But
Sarah, can I come back in 5 minutes? My dog has been begging me to go
Yeah,
out. Or, you know,
can just go into avatar mode. It's good. We'll meet you, and then feel free.
Let's do. No, you know what? Let's do 10 minutes. He'll hold it. He's a German Shepherd. He's a
I'm
tough
totally
guy.
okay with letting the dogs out. Mine do that too. Go ahead, do what you got to do because we're gonna get
Go
through
let
super
the dogs
chats.
out, Ken.
We will still be here when you get back. I promise.
You know, give me 10 minutes and then I'll wrap. But I'd love to see how this next part goes.
Oh shit.
As a newbie.
Oh man, coming in on the new debater with open panel dumpster fire. So we're gonna do super chats first. That's why I say now's the time to go let the dog out, and then we'll go into
I'm going to the toilet.
Go ahead. You guys go do that. I'm gonna actually I'll just start reading through a bunch of shit. Yeah. Cole Marshall in with a big 5. Jake and Jim Bob, I didn't even know you were both here. Love you guys. You're gonna kill it. Wi-Fi with the big 5. Is it just me or does Not So Yurdite give off absolute psycho vibes? Retro coming in with the big 5. You like feminism, don't ya? In with the big 5. You like debating feminism, don't ya? Brody Bruce with the big 5. Jake, you're the man. Get these soy boys. Jonathan with a big 5. If men and women are ontologically equal, that entails feminism's final end is a removal of distinction.
I'm letting the dog out. I'll be back in a second.
I told you. Between the genders. This guy already cooked. Jim Bob, you jump in whenever you want. I'm going to start, actually, I'm going to skip to the 10s only because there's 193 of these in here. Tyler Williams in with a big 10 saying feminism is Kool-Aids. Extend, I could never say their name, with the big 10. Why doesn't Ukraine ask for more women soldiers? They are asking for more men. Brandon in with the 10. No one has an obligation to enforce law, but we have one to follow law. Let's ask Eurydite, would we have an obligation to enforce the obligation to follow the law if in the law it said we should? Any thoughts there, gentlemen, to add on?
Well,
or
no,
anything?
it's a good point because the question ends up being, do you have any obligations at all? From a patriarchal view, we, especially from derivative of a Christian view, is that you do actually have an obligation to treat your home like it's its own nation. And so you are the enforcement arm of your home. And even in public, we didn't get into this, but if a woman was being accosted by a bunch of men, it would be a bunch of men having the duty to follow them, and to break it up, and to resolve it, even if they didn't have uniforms, which was weird because Eurydite was saying it's not men, it's uniforms. Well, no, that's not actually true. It's actually men who are in uniforms. The kind of brute force required to stop other men, it requires men. So, I mean, it's a good question, Brandon, and unfortunately, she didn't want to answer any questions.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. And for the record here in just a second, I am going to drop the link to the members only first, and then I will drop it to the public. Wait, where was I? Sorry, now I lost my place. Was there a second one in there? I think they sent the second one saying the same thing. This person. Why isn't Ukraine asking for more women soldiers? They are asking for men. Yeah, they sent the same one twice. Andrew, you're here. I'll go ahead and bring you up, actually, since
you are too kind, Sarah. I appreciate it very much. I'm not going to waste a ton of time. I was just really hoping that I could have a few minutes with Ken. I had a few questions for him, but if you want to toss me the background until he gets back so you can continue with super chats, I'm totally fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Harsh, what?
Oh, no.
Something
I was
happened?
just talking to myself.
Harsh Face came in with a big 10. We will always need feminism as long as women are 50% of the population. We will never not need them to pull their weight. We can't have half of our country docile and easily conquered. Feminism stays. You're welcome to respond, gentlemen.
I don't understand the last part of that, docile. What's more docile than half of your population being women and pretending that they can actually fulfill the role of men? I mean, they can't.
Yeah.
Right?
And what's more
It's like,
docile than emasculated men who have women doing everything for them and telling them what to do? That's what's docile.
yeah, I just also it just brings up, like we saw tonight, that the term feminism, as we strictly defined, as anything oppositional to patriarchy. So it doesn't matter the spectrum of Eurydite's feminism or Ken's feminism or someone they disagree with. Ultimately, all of it's the same. It's this notion of egalitarianism, which is a descriptive why.
Okay, that's fair. Let me just pin this real quick. All right. The StreamYard link has been posted for members only. How do you say this? Extanglia?
Stanglia. You got it.
Extanglia? Okay. America's military is the best because of trillions, not because of women.
Yeah, I think that the military argument is such a weak one, because the reason why places like Afghanistan, for example, don't have female militaries is because they're more primitive than we are. So the only reason why women are able to enter the workforce and to have the air-conditioned offices in the West is because we have progressed so much as a society scientifically. And it's the same thing with the military as well. The only reason why they're able to take these roles in the military is because they're so advanced and they can sort of allow for it. But if there was a serious threat, then they would have to get the hell out.
That's a really good point. I wish it came up. I wish I located this earlier, Jake, is that they were arguing that it was feminism that produced innovation. I would argue that it's innovation that produced feminism. It's actually the opposite, is that the modernity and the luxury and the amenities and the convenience is actually allows for this luxury system. Now, if it were the case that we reverted to, hunters and gatherers tomorrow at the push of a button, guess what would still be there? Patriarchy. Guess what wouldn't? Feminism.
Sarcastic Warlock says Jake and Jim Bob together are like a buddy cop movie where Jake is the dysgenic Australian and Jim Bob is the first Orthodox Hawaiian 5-0 with a dramatic.
It's so true.
Oh my God.
Totally.
That person has won the debate.
I need glasses.
My eyes are going up too.
Here we go.
There. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, Lord have mercy. A Harsh Face says, we need our women to be disruptive and defiant to the very end. We will never let our women be conquered and taken over without a fight. Any nation thinking American women are soft targets will be disappointed.
Oh, yeah, because those women will just show them how it is. They'll just show them who's boss.
Boss. Phoebes. America is dominant because we use fake money to pay for everything. We are 36 trillion in debt. Wow, that's heavy. Is it
It's
up
sick.
to that much already?
Yeah, that was what I was trying to argue, is saying that it's like, doesn't matter what you think your production is. If you're fully in debt and then other countries are buying your debt from you, it's like a rental debt system. It's like, what are we really talking about? What are we even valuing here? Nothing.
All right. GDP went up numerically in part because the dollar isn't worth as much, so more dollars get used for the same thing. Does that kind of like lean into what you were saying?
Yeah, there's so many more variables there. You can't just point to a scoreboard number and say, look, good. There's a lot more going on.
All right. Jonathan says, Yurdai, debt is cool. I can appeal to Christianity for politics, but not you. My GDP that I can't sustain long term because I nuked the birth rate through feminism.
Yep.
Feminism is a safe form of pop control. College women or stressed women are less likely to have children. It's either this or mandatory chemicals castration. Pick your battles. AJ will take jabs en masse. Jason Cassell with the big 100. Jim Bob, for you. Here's some money. You deserve it, debating these idiots.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's very generous of you.
Beaten Cheek says, Jim Bob straight up owned this with Jake. Love this work. As a veteran, this Navy guy is the epitome of the downfall of men within the military. I wouldn't trust this guy in my deployments. He has drank too much soy, bro. And Ken, you're welcome to respond.
Yeah, I'll never criticize another vet. Thanks for your service. Beaten Cheeks. Appreciate what you did for your country. I certainly did my part, flying EP3s off North Korea and China. I hope you learned something from your service, and thanks for doing it.
Fair
Should
enough.
we bring in Andrew?
Yeah,
because Ken's only here for a little bit, right?
Yeah,
I got.
we can go ahead and do that.
Sorry, I got kids who haven't seen me, so I got to go in about 3 or 4 minutes.
That's fair. I'll go ahead and bring in Andrew, and I will balance the scales.
Well, actually, this just won't take long. If you don't mind the powdered dusty, this exchange won't take very long, and I'll be out of your guys' hair. Ken, I just had a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind humoring me. Nice to meet you, by the way. My name is Andrew Wilson. I just wanted to ask you, are you aware that in early 1900s America, the age of consent was extremely low, around 15, 16, and women often got married at that age?
I'm vaguely aware. Yeah.
Would you consider that PDF-philia or something akin to PDF-philia?
I honestly haven't given much thought to the.
Well, do you think it's wrong? Do you think it's wrong?
By today's social mores, yeah.
Do you think it's wrong?
Yeah, by today's social mores.
Okay,
yes.
so you think it's wrong. Where else would you have preferred to have lived?
In the 1900s?
Yeah.
Probably here.
Oh, okay. So then that means you support PDF-philia.
No,
right?
I think social mores change over time.
No, you have to. No, you have to support PDF-philia, just like Jim Bob has to support feminism because he wants to live here, right, Dunce?
No. Social.
No, isn't that the case?
Over time, and
social norms change over time.
Sure, you don't think social norms change over time?
Of course they do, but the point is your argument. So let me give you the argument. Your argument is Jim Bob and Jake would prefer to live here in the United States, even though there's feminism. Thus, feminism must be good. If that is the case, and you would have preferred to have lived here in the early 1900s when people were PDF files, that hence means PDF-philia is good, right?
But they would prefer to live in literally any country, not just the U.S.
Wait,
feminism.
What?
Because it makes those societies stronger. They're just not
So
willing to admit
PDF-philia makes society stronger, right?
No, feminism does.
I see.
Was never
but the argument is that feminism
makes society stronger.
Right, but hey,
I
don't have much time, and you don't have much time, so I'll just make this very quick.
Experience that. So
if it is the case, I need you to understand your logic here. Here's your premise. Jim Bob and Jake must support feminism, or at least think that the countries that have feminism are really good due to feminism, right? Because they would prefer not to live anywhere else.
Not my conjecture.
Stop. Yeah, it was. In fact, I got your argument written down. I wrote it down. I'll read it back to you. Hang on. I'll read it back to you. I wrote it down. Here was your argument. You don't want to live
actually
anywhere
betray
else.
their
You
thought
don't want to live anywhere
They
else,
have this
Bob.
thought process that they articulated over the course of 2 hours, but their actions actually betray their own arguments.
Yeah, but so do yours. If you don't believe in PDF-philia, but you still would prefer to live in a country which had PDF-philia, therefore PDF-philia must be the thing that you like about the country? No. So then why would you attribute that to Jim Bob or Jake, you dolt? Like, do you understand how bad that logic is?
Because it literally applies to every country in the world that they would
So
have the option to
PDF-philia, bro. So did PDF-philia. What are you talking about? It's the same argument in reverse. I just wanted to point that out, right? Jim Bob, Jake, very nice to watch you guys this evening. But Ken, it was nice to meet you. I don't have any no hard feelings or anything. But I'm just trying to explain to you, like, the logic of that argument makes no sense. So,
anything else, guys? This has been a fascinating education in how this world works.
Well, I think that I would say that even though, as far as the premise goes, I agree that I don't think that feminism is beneficial to society. That after listening to Jake and Jim Bob completely blow their side of the argument, I think that they're the feminists.
Wait,
because
what?
The ones that are whining about women not having to enroll in the draft.
No, that's testing inconsistency. Dunce, I'll take Andrew. I'm going to start using dunce, Andrew. By the way,
what do feminists want?
Hey guys,
dunce. You know what testing logical consistency is?
What do
feminists hold on,
do they
hold
want
on.
equality
I think
between men and
Ken.
women?
I think Ken wanted to.
Oh, sorry, Ken.
Are you making an exit, Ken?
Yeah, if that's what this is called, I'm making an exit. Thanks for having me on.
have a nice day, sir.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Cheers.
You got it. Cheers.
Powder Dusty, dude, do you know the difference between taking a position and testing a position?
So you weren't actually taking that position?
No, I don't think women should go in the draft or in the army at all. I don't think they should vote. I don't think a lot of things about women, but we're testing their logic. It's an internal critique. We say, okay, you want egalitarianism, which feminism essentially is, and then we push Ken and Eurodite in the position where, oh, isn't it interesting that men have this duty to not fight the government when they're tapped for military?
I look way cooler when I'm smoking, by the way.
Two smokers down here.
I just want to point it out. Like, look at the difference.
So no, we're not whining. In fact, feminism is impossible to defend because it's practically impossible. It's logically impossible. So
it just seems like a weird angle to take, that to combat feminism, you would argue for more feminism.
I didn't. Do you understand what we just said?
I understand what you're saying.
Their position
what's the argument for more feminism?
Equality, right? And we go, oh, why isn't there equality here? That's not us saying they should be. We're saying from their view they should be drafted if they really believe there's equality. The reason we did that is because both of them have to admit that the armed forces, the military, the police has to be. It's not just that it happens to be. It has to be predominantly men. That's just a necessary component. If it's the case that the enforcement arm for a society, any good society or a bad society, requires the enforcement of men, it actually is patriarchal. This fiction of feminism is just a luxury illusion. It's just a temporary luxury illusion.
So I got a question then. Why would you choose this approach instead of pointing out the actual issues with feminism?
Those are the issues with feminism.
The issue with feminism is that it's not internally consistent enough.
Well, that's an issue.
That would be the issue with any position, right?
Yeah, but practically there's an issue too. Like women, feminists can't actually defend their own rights. Who's that dude, Andrew? I was going to bring it up, but I didn't need to. Who's the dude from Britain who had premise 4? He actually pointed out how many hundreds of years ago that women don't have the capacity to defend their own rights. Therefore, giving them the vote is actually an inconsistent position. They can't even.
Yeah, I can give you the name. It's 1 second here, Jim Bob. Since you asked so nicely, his name is Lord Cromer.
Lord Cromer.
Yeah, Lord Cromer. Fourth argument against feminism was, quote, from the anti-suffragettes, those who make laws should have the physical force to enforce them, and this women do not possess.
So what is it they do possess that didn't really come up? It came up a little bit. What is this equal trade? If men are happily willing to say, oh, you know what? There's a moment where I'm going to die for my family. Maybe there's a moment I would die for my country. If I consider that some type of obligation in a certain scenario, what is equal for women in that regard? They have nothing. They have nothing. What is it?
Sure, but I don't think that there needs. Since I'm not a feminist, don't think that there needs to be an equal offset.
Okay, if that I think that that's a totally fair position. If you don't think that there needs to be an equal offset, then why the fuck, if men are charged with security, should they continue to do that?
To do what? Provide an offset?
No, to provide security. If there's nothing that they're getting which is of equal value from women.
Well, they are getting something of equal value, I think, which is a protected family. The family is intrinsically valuable. Don't you agree?
Well, I don't understand. Why couldn't men have families and give women no rights?
Just because men are the fighters who defend the family doesn't mean that it doesn't necessitate them giving equal rights.
It doesn't. You're right. It doesn't necessitate them
I'm
giving
not
women
arguing
equal
for
rights.
equal rights. Yeah, I'm not arguing for
So
equal
then
rights.
I don't understand what your argument is then. So if the argument here is just, well, wait a second, women don't necessarily have to have an equal offset duty. I would agree. What is the duty to men to protect their rights rather than just like, I don't know, fucking enslave them?
My argument was against equal obligations.
Okay, so then if there's no equal obligation, why shouldn't men just go ahead and enslave women?
All right, we're there.
So nothing. There's no argument. Like, it's just silly.
Yeah, I mean that ends what I was arguing against. Now I can tell you why I wouldn't support enslaving women, because it'd be fucking miserable and you don't need to. Women want to be with men anyways, so why would you?
Well, what would be worth it, Dusty? What would be worth it for women to offer, though? If men put their lives on the line and say, you know what,
What would be like a counter duty? Yeah, what would be a counter duty that you could point to that only women could accommodate that men couldn't, in exchange for this protection and security, which men, even at the familial home level, can provide? Can you think of a single thing only women can do? Can you think what would that be, bro?
Right. Well, I wouldn't say that there's an inherent duty on either person, unless if a man decides to take.
There's no inherent duty for men to do it.
If a man decides to take a family on, then he has an inherent duty that comes with taking on the family.
No,
a man who's single.
That's not the case. Are you saying that you don't have an inherent duty to protect the infirm and to protect those weaker than yourself as a man?
Correct.
You don't?
What about your own family?
You have no duty to do so?
That's my own family. Once you take on a family, then you have a duty to protect them. I
So
don't have a duty to defend every weak person out there.
Okay, but do you believe that women, though, do gain from the idea that men within the patriarchy, even at the family level, will do everything in their power to protect the infirm, including women? Do you agree that that is a societal standard which is upheld in all Western nations?
There is a societal duty. Society puts upon itself the duty to protect those in most civilizations. But I would not say that.
Can you answer the question I asked you?
I'm answering the question that you asked me.
No. I'm going to ask you again.
I'm giving you my answer.
Yeah, but don't.
You only get to do one side of this discussion.
But you just evaded, bro. Don't evade.
I'm explaining it. You want a yes or a no, but it's not.
How about this? How about you give me a yes or no and then the qualifier? So that seems fair.
How about you ask the question,
the same thing,
and then I answer the question.
Yeah. But
okay.
if you could give me a yes or no,
ask the question again,
hang on. Okay, so here's the question: Can you think of a duty that is on par with men and the men's role of the protection of the entirety of society that only women can do? That would be equal to that. Can you think of that? And if you can think of that, what would it be?
What do you think?
I disagree with the premise of the question.
Okay, great. Hang on, Ryan. That's fair. Yeah. Who cares? But can he answer the question?
Why would I answer a question?
Oh, you can't answer the fucking. Nobody can ever answer this fucking question. Drives me crazy.
Because it's a bad.
All right.
It's a bad.
Have a wonderful day, guys. Take care.
I mean, Powder Dusty. What's the obvious thing that women offer? Forget a duty.
Reason.
Okay, hold on. Forget a duty. Just say, let's say it's a cold ass transaction.
Right.
What is it in addition to just the vagina? And sex.
Them away. Big baby fascish.
What do you think, Powder Dusty, is the thing that men of good nature, of quality value, are looking for in a woman in the long term that only a woman could provide them?
The way that you frame that question, it must be a family.
Yeah, children.
Right.
Children.
Do you want to know why I disagree with the premise or the question though in the first place? Because of the assumption that men have a pre-existing obligation. I don't believe men have any pre-existing obligation until they decide to engage in a family.
That's fine if you take that position.
That's great.
That's
Can I defend? So
worldview,
earlier,
right?
someone said you can't defend. Jim Bob said you can't defend feminism. No one can do that. I think Jake said no one can defend feminism. It's indefensible. So let me give it a shot. Okay?
I'm going to hold on.
You're already
I'm
doing
going to
it
let
by
you.
your
We're gonna kick back off with you, Ryan. I want to go ahead and since we're kind of already there, and I don't give a fuck at this point. Let me send out a big apology. Obviously, we didn't get through super chats. Things kind of changed. I apologize. That is on me. But we're going to go ahead and just kick off into open panel. Gentlemen, if everybody's okay with that and agreeable, I'd like to do that, and we'll get back to the regular stuff here, okay?
Awesome.
Okay, rules of the game here is I don't give a fuck about your feelings. Everybody shut up when I tell you to shut up. I get very irritated when people talk over each other. Please refrain from doing that. It's very obnoxious. Nobody can hear you. So therefore, your whole point of whatever you're saying is fucking moot. All right. Jim Bob stepped away for just a second. But Ryan, if you want to go ahead and kick it off, that's fine.
Yeah, please. So I have like 60-second opening statement, and then I'll pass off to whoever wants to engage with it. So the first thing that I wanted to address was Jim Bob's like total misreading of Simone de Beauvoir. She wasn't attacking the family unit. She criticized rigid, unequal roles that disempower women within the family. I don't think feminism weakens families; it strengthens them. When women have autonomy, education, and economic security, entire families become more stable, emotionally healthy, and resilient. Policies like parental leave, equal pay, and better health care directly lead to stronger marriages, lower divorce rates, and children who are happier and better educated. The real threats to families are regressive anti-feminist policies and economic insecurity, the exact kind we're seeing intensified under the Trump regime, which consistently is stripping away vital resources that families depend on. Feminism is not about dismantling families, it's about empowering every family member so they can thrive together.
Thank you, Ryan.
I sort of agree. I don't know as a man why I would I don't know why as a man I would expend any energy if I felt that was toward my wife and my children feeling like they were being taken advantage of. And so whoever that is, Simone de Beauvoir, I haven't read that since college, but I can just open my ears and my eyes, and that makes me pretty happy to support feminism.
Man, this was beautiful. This is beautiful. This was this was the perfect microcosm of the qualities of feminism versus masculinity. I'm gonna tell you why. The emotional aspect. Jim Bob now let me finish. Jim Bob completely destroyed them. But I'm gonna tell you what happened. Jim Bob destroyed them for so long that he got frustrated because it was so clear what he was saying was undeniable. So he resulted to a lower, I would say, form strategy of insults. But it's understandable. We get it because he was destroying them so much. But the young lady who did a good job for what it was, for what she could possibly do, her body language changed, and she was grabbing any type of reasonableness that did not make any sense because nothing she was saying could rebuttal what Jim Bob was saying. Now, Ken, he's the most dangerous person on the panel of us all. Because as a man, he has allowed some woman in his life to lower his self-esteem, and it's so clear. There's someone I guarantee you in Ken's life that's a woman that has lowered his self-esteem and has gaslighted him for so long, and it tricked him to make his qualities as a masculine man inferior, so he now is yielding to the feminine. This is the issue. We keep making it black and white. We keep making, is it better than this or that?
Land the plane.
There's a feminine quality that is better for females to execute, and there's a masculinity quality that's better for men. The issue is it comes down to women thinking power makes them weaker overall. No, they're just weaker in that aspect.
Yep. I totally thought that hair was going to be on the feminist side. I got the first two people completely backwards.
Yeah.
Bro, you're like a 40-year-old.
So Ryan, I want to respond to Ryan's points, though, because
go ahead.
So Ryan, you're saying that feminism actually is good for the family unit. Feminism creates more children. It creates bigger family units. And you're saying that the feminists actually argue for lower divorce. They want to stay. You think that feminism creates lower divorce rates, and that it strengthens the family unit because the government comes in and subsidizes the family and acts like the family. That's your point.
I don't know why you have to so desperately misrepresent my point. No, the things that I said feminism is good for the family in regards to were economic stability, because the problems that families run into are from largely economic instability. So we can primarily focus on that, right? Not Ryan, I'm talking about what families actually think about on a day. Hang on, I'm landing the plane, right?
I mean, if you ask Jake something, it's just going to divulge into psychobabble.
About what families actually deal with on a day-to-day basis, the stuff that you guys don't seem to want to talk about for whatever reason.
Okay, Ryan, I just want to ask you a question. Initially, when we made the movement to take a bunch of women and put them into the workforce, did that create perhaps a domino cascade effect potentially for why we currently need two-person incomes?
I don't think I would say that there was like one moment where we suddenly decided.
So when you add, hold on. Just
over decades, women and men pushed for the right to enter
totally
the
dishonest. Hold on a second.
It's totally not.
If you suddenly flood the workforce with more people, what happens?
That's not what happened.
Hold on.
Let me answer it. I can answer this. Go ahead. Is that the end of the question?
Yeah.
Okay. What happens is both you have a decrease in wages per person, but also, especially over time, you have an expansion of the entire economy and GDP. Overall, it will not greatly reduce. It will reduce, but not greatly, the average wage per worker. The reason that you need two incomes per household now is because of inflation, money printing. Is what
So hold on, but here's the thing, Flow State. Isn't it the case that pushing women to get into the workforce actually pushes them first through the corridor of debt for college? So in other words,
no.
Say that again.
I would say that
hold on. Isn't it the
I'm distracted
case
by G.I. Joe
that a bunch of women were like, we got to get into the workforce, and what it turned into is basically a fucking a straight line through accumulating debt through college education, and then that promise that they're going to get a job. Hold on, if that's the case, right?
Well, I mean,
what you have now is a bunch of debt. So what you're saying,
college
is like,
being a scam is a different issue.
No,
just
it's
because
not different.
Women,
no, it's not.
It
different,
is a different
dude.
issue.
No,
you didn't know what GDP was, and I have an economics degree. I can tell you what the fuck it is.
Women want the opportunity, but they're not even taking advantage afterwards because they're naturally inclined to get the fuck back in the house anyway. Jim Bob,
they absolutely are taking advantage of it. Women are in the workforce.
You're trying too hard to lower your intelligence for them. It's not going to work, bro.
Yeah, how are you this mad that women are in the workforce, yet you're pretending like they don't make it into the workforce?
Why don't you guys contend with his point?
I have an economic
Contend with his point.
He's not lowering his intelligence.
Stop for just a second. Andrew is trying to get back on. Can everybody not click that link? Just don't click the link. I'm just going to keep booting you. Please just let Andrew get back on so I can bring it back in.
Yeah, I can bounce too if you need space on stage, Sarah.
No, it's okay. Just hold on a second. All right, dipshit that came in for the third fucking time that I just said not to do it. You are now officially banned because you can't follow simple orders. Andrew, if you're listening, thank you.
That's that
All
masculine.
right.
Now she's tapping in her masculine. I love that, Sarah. That's
I-
you outside
agree.
now. No, I'm
Can I
joking.
say on that point, I think when men and women both like embrace the positive aspects of masculinity and femininity, those are usually the most
Gentlemen,
well-rounded, like
you don't have much time left.
Society.
But
Andrew, for example. Wait, I'm finishing. Like Andrew, for example, he embraces his femininity all the time. He's constantly gossiping. He's talking about doing all these, right? Like he's a very, very feminine personality in a lot of ways, but he's also a hyper masculine personality. He drinks and he smokes and he does like all these characteristics.
Okay. We get it, dude. You don't like Andrew. We get it.
But he's dual natured, right?
Actually, he does. Hang on. In his defense, I think he likes me fine. Like I don't have any problem with Radical Coder. We've been doing, having discourse back and forth for how many fucking years? Like it's been a while. Do you still have the stupid gloves, bro? Hang on. Put your hands. Where's the fucking stupid gloves, bro?
No, I have tendonitis, dog. What do you want me to do?
Come on, it's weird. Come on, it's weird. You know it's fucking weird.
Yeah, that's why I don't wear them all the time. But like my hands hurt sometimes.
I like the fact that you don't have the goofy glasses now too. It's almost like you're growing. You know what? I'm proud of you, son. It's almost like you're growing into your own. I'm proud of you.
Why are you
son.
black and white? Why is the only thing that's colored is your shirt and you're black and white? So is that an effect or it's weird? Are you just unhealthy or
it's just a white light? But can we actually talk about the topic?
Oh, okay.
I'm way too black to figure out who's being sarcastic or not. This is crazy. Look, Jim Bob was like Charlie, and the pretty boy in the top left was like Vivek. My thing is, Jim Bob, I think you're a fucking genius. If I could humbly say something, if you're able to hold that same conversation and not let the stupidity get to you, I think you'll be a fucking king. All right,
what stupidity?
You mean my aggression?
Go ahead.
Can you? Well, here's the thing. Like, here's what I would ask. Can one of you guys contend with his arguments? Not. I don't want to. Hang on. I don't want to hear about his tone being bad and that he said he was going to fight a girl who wanted equality. I'm not talking about any of this. I did tell Sarah that she came in. She was at DebateCon, and I was like, "You want some pizza?" And she was like, I don't know. I'm not really that hungry. I was like, "You eat that fucking pizza." And so you know what I mean? Like, but if you guys could just go ahead and contend with Jim Bob's argument, like I'm here for. I want to actually hear you guys refute Jim Bob and Jake Rattlesnake's argument in good faith. Can we actually do that?
All due respect.
No one cares, Doc.
I don't see where Jim Bob and Jake grabbed onto anything I have to respond to.
Okay, well then, I think that's totally fair. So what you should do for the course of conversation, shut the fuck up while other people engage with it. Go ahead, guys.
That's a fair response.
Andrew, right? I want to respond.
I think it's fair.
Well, can I? Because I think you're not contending with Jim Bob, right?
People are going to say I'm lazy, but
man, that's funny.
Andrew, first of all, it's an honor to be on the same panel as you. I'm a big fan of you. I genuinely mean that.
I'm a big fan of you now too, man. I'm a big fan of you too. But can we hear some responses to the arguments?
One more time. The reason why it's important, and of course, we should not let his tone compromise his message. But
then stop fucking tone policing and get to the arguments, bro.
He's icing my head.
I'm joking. Let me finish. The reason why it is important is because if he does want his message to touch the women, then we have to recognize that
God, stop being gynocentric, bro. We don't need women. You don't have to have your message touch women. Here's what you need. Hang on. You have here's your options. I just had a debate with a mega ultra feminist before I came on here. Okay.
Oh, no, another
you have X amount of options when it comes to message delivery. There's only so many people who are going to be within the prism of even being accepting of a message that you may have. I think that the prism of delivering a message to offset what is generally speaking in the red pill community, things like this, with the Christian ethicist position, which is exactly what Jake and Made by Jim Bob do, where you can state emphatically what masculinity is within the prism of actual moral oughts rather than just descriptors, but actual prescriptors, I think is great. I think it's wonderful. I think that we've been needing to do this for a long time, and here we are. But here's the thing, man. Men need to contend with these arguments too. And it's not just about reaching women. Okay, everyone's always trying to pander and reach fucking women. I want to reach fucking men. Can we start with that? And then I think we'll be able to drag some of those broads kicking and screaming through the fucking finish.
Men are so much more stupid, though. They just
men just want their. Isn't most of your audience?
I don't have a very large sample size. To be fair.
Yeah, I know, but
I don't
how much is your
understand
sample size?
What do you don't
I have
understand,
like
Doc?
600
What are you
subs.
saying?
I don't know what the proportion is.
Okay, yeah. Do you think most of them are men or women who are in your live chat right now?
Probably mostly men. Yeah, well, I'm not
mostly
streaming
men.
right
So
now.
just shut up with the criticism. Then Ryan makes no sense.
That's
But
not-
anyway,
that's
go
not-
ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Hey,
So-
by the way, Sarah, is most of your audience men or women?
98%, I believe, are men.
Oh my god! Oh my god! It's crazy.
Totally bodied.
It's
I
like
know. That was
men. Yeah. So,
totally bodied. So
Yeah.
to address one of the first things Jim Bob
Stupid-ass
said,
argument.
One at a time. Ryan, go ahead.
One of the first things that Jim Bob said when he got on was to critique Simone de Beauvoir, right, by saying
Yeah.
that she hates the family unit. I don't
She
agree
does.
with this. I don't think she does. I think she hates what you think the family unit is.
What does she
thinks
think
it's
it is?
I would say that her idea of a family unit would just be like any household, right, that has a family in it. Like
You mean
guys
11
have
gay
very
dudes and a
specific,
baby?
isolated
What
family
is
unit,
11 gay
right?
dudes and a baby a family, Ryan?
Can you tell me how Simone? Can you tell me how?
11 gay dudes and a
Can you
baby.
tell me, Ryan? How
Why
did
can't
you?
it be? Hang on, no, hang on. Why can't that be a family? What's wrong with 11?
Wait,
Like,
Ryan, you
whatever,
define a
5
family
gay
unit
dudes
by
or like,
saying a
like
family.
2
Child
moms.
molestation,
What's wrong
that's
with
the
2 moms?
Holy fuck, shut up.
There's something
10 people, it's hard to
biologically we're all biologically inclined to pair bond and reproduce offspring, right? So whether you believe in God or evolution, either way, you have to acknowledge that a man and a woman and their children are basically a core family unit in a way that 11 men and a baby are not.
And those families, those kinds of families are going to be more stable when you have the option, right? If things get bad enough that people can separate from those situations, right? They can leave
Okay,
that situation.
well, Ryan,
if it's
I
unhealthy
think
for
I think
everyone
that this is a
involved,
fair argument. Can I contend with it?
right? Please.
Okay, Ryan. So there's no problem with alternative family units, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay, great. Should 11 men be able to get married and have children?
Personally, I don't care, but I mean, I think both of us would like the state. I think both of us want the state involvement of marriage to change slightly. Right? I'm okay with it. I don't give a shit.
He got up on the ladder. He got up on the ladder and jumped off really quick.
The reason that it sucks is
Hang
because
on,
that's
Ryan,
not
Ryan,
a stable family situation.
Ryan,
It's
hang on.
not.
Ryan, should 1,000 gay men, right,
This
be
is
able
super,
to?
I mean, like nobody's actually doing this in real life. Why
Ryan,
don't we
can you
talk
shut
about
the
something
fuck
that's
up,
actually
Ryan, and answer my
No,
question?
well, why don't we talk about
Ryan,
something that's
Ryan,
actually happening?
can you
Maybe
stop
I will.
spurging, Ryan? Can you
I'm
stop
going to
spurging?
make you
I'm
guys
gonna wait for you to ask me a real
speed
question.
and gay
Okay,
this
well,
up.
here's the
you
real
know,
question. I'm just testing your logical consistency here. You just said no. That's no problem with 11. Would it be a problem with 1,000?
I think there's a lot of
Sounds like a
logistical
party to
problems that
me.
would come from that, and we don't have to worry about them because no one's
What?
doing that. So let's
Well,
talk about
hang
things that
on,
are
hang on.
actually happening,
Well,
right?
What are the things that you would be opposed to if it was 1,000 men?
It sounds super complicated.
We're just
It'd
gonna
be a
need
mess.
more lube, man.
Yeah,
What
that's
difference
not,
do you-
that doesn't tell me anything. Can you tell me what the problem actually would be if 1,000 gay men who all had butt sex every single night with each other adopted a single child communally?
What is it about
Hey,
butt
can you
sex
stop
that you think is
talking, bro?
ruining families?
And answer my question. They adopted one child communally. Can you tell me
I
what the
don't care
problem
about
is?
this question. I'm not
Bro,
gonna engage.
you're not gonna engage. Okay.
Look,
I'm
it's
not
a-
going to engage with
Ryan,
why 1,000
Ryan,
men
it's
can't get
actually
married.
a
It's
fair
fucking
question.
stupid, and you
Look,
know it,
look,
so no.
look.
Yeah, 1,000 men get married, Ryan. What's the problem?
It's totally
I
fair.
just don't care. It's not a real thing.
So-
It's
so
not a real
what-
thing that's
let's-
happening.
let's
Why
go
do
on
you want to talk
past
about
the
real
list.
shit?
He
Why do you
doesn't-
talk
he
about
doesn't
something
care.
that's
Ryan,
real?
Ryan, he's actually supporting your original
Howard.
statement if you weren't to in your
What's
feelings.
next?
Cowardly.
Because he's actually pointing out there's a necessary level of a female entity. But you're so in your feelings, you can't even see that he's making your point now.
Well, then why can't if that was
We're
his
so
argument,
over
then
it.
he could
You
just
know
argue
what?
about 2 men.
What's
right? He could
next?
just make that argument. Instead, he's going to 1,000 because it's ridiculous and he's an absurdist.
It's not
Like me a little bit,
ridiculous.
to be
It's
fair.
not ridiculous, Ryan. Why? Because you
Okay.
can break up 1,000 gay
Ryan-
men
Ryan-
into different
Ryan-
states.
What about 3 men?
But
Yeah,
9.
there are probably families with 3 men who raise kids just
Okay.
fine. What's wrong
4
with that?
men?
What is
count to
wrong? What is wrong?
1,000.
What you seem to think there's something wrong with it? You tell me.
No, I'm asking you, Ryan. What about 4 men?
Andrew, please count to 1,000.
My concern is the economic stability of a family.
Can you answer my question,
And
please?
my
I mean,
concern
I'm
is
kinda-
the economic and emotional stability of the family.
Ryan, can you answer
I
my
sort of
question,
agree
please?
with.
No,
This is the one time I've
What
ever
about
agreed
one
with
man and
Andrew
10
on something.
kids?
I don't think the state has any legal obligation to recognize, for tax and for lots of legal reasons, relationships of more than 2 people. I'm very much pro rights and all this other stuff, but I don't understand why.
Andrew doesn't
do
think the state
push-ups
should
on
legalize
live
2 men getting married, right? He
Yeah,
wants
yeah,
to make that illegal.
that's true.
to be
But
clear.
Yeah, that's a
Ryan-
really crazy idea, right?
So
Two
all this
guys
other
can-
stuff is complete non sequitur because that's not even a thing.
Yeah, Brian, these aren't
Andrew's focused on 2 men.
Two gay guys can own guns, right?
Ryan, am I spurging out or are you spurging out, Ryan? Can we
I
just
am.
calm
I am
down?
right now. I'm
Yeah,
spurring
so
out hard.
stop
Yeah.
stop
I
spurting.
missed you,
Calm
buddy.
down.
I'm emotional. I'm like,
Why are you so emotional? Just answer my question.
It's been a long time. I don't do this a lot.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just back up, right? I just want to know if three men have a family where they're all married together, let's say, and do you think they should be able to adopt kids?
Sure.
Okay, 4,
maybe
17.
I don't know. I don't know. These are not things that are happening, so I'm not concerned. I'm concerned about the things that are happening. Why do you not want to talk about the things that are happening?
Because I'm just testing the consistency. If you're saying that there's an alternative,
we know that you are consistent in not wanting 2 men to get married, right? That you don't want 2 men to get married.
But Ryan,
correct.
All you're trying to do is shift the burden of the view onto me, which is fine.
I'm shifting it to
Ryan, I'll answer your questions if you answer mine in good faith. I promise I will. Can we make that deal? Yeah. No. Okay. Well, fine, Ryan. Then every question you'll ask me from now on, I'll just say I don't care.
Okay. Then we're not going to get very far. We can.
We're not going to get very far. So, but here's what the deal I'm willing to make is that if you're good faith and you consistently answer my questions, then in good faith I will consistently answer yours. I don't think you can ask for better faith than that. But the thing is like, but if I ask you a question,
really ask you questions.
But if you ask a question and or I ask you a question, you just say I don't care. Then it's very good faith for me to just say, well, then okay, Ryan, then I don't care about any of your questions. You see what I mean?
That's fine. Then we can have other people join in. Then that's fine.
Oh man, that's too bad, Ryan. We could have had a really good back and forth here.
Yeah, but you wouldn't engage with the real question, which is why don't you want 2 men to get married?
Ryan, I asked you a question first, and then you just said I don't
told you
care.
that's not a thing that's happening, right?
Okay, the reason I don't think 2 men shouldn't get married is because I don't care, and that's enough justification for the things I want.
Well, there we go. We finished the conversation. Then
there we go. We finished the conversation. You see how lame that was? Do you think that was good faith on both?
It was. Yeah, I totally agree.
Was it good faith on both parts? No, I don't think it was.
Yeah, you're right. It was not.
It was not.
Oh, that was quick.
Ryan, there's actually an Instagram account with 3 dudes who have adopted kids. I forget what it's called. It's like 3 dudes.
Do you think that kid should be stolen from them?
Yeah.
Why?
Saved is the right word.
Was the gay man question leading somewhere, or was it just?
Yeah, I kind of. Andrew, is there a stat for a negative impact more men are in a household? Honestly, and I like Andrew a lot, but is there a stat for negativity increasing with more men in the household? I'm genuinely asking. I don't know.
I don't know either. But before we do that, Jim Bob just called for this family to have their child.
Andrew.
Hang on, real quick. Jim Bob just called for the state to come take this family's child away. So I would like him to justify that.
Yeah, I just call it child abuse based on my preferences.
Okay.
Can you give it to
that's
me?
not a very strong case. You wouldn't like.
What do you mean? It's just as justified as your position of everything you just fucking did. Black and
not
white.
if you put it to a judge, it wouldn't be.
I don't care about them.
A judge could change based on
judge
rights.
enforces laws based on the preferences of the people who put the law.
Everybody does things according to their own preferences.
Yeah, it's all preference.
Yeah, that's why it was all preference.
I'm sure this is the forced doctrine.
My preference, gentlemen, would be that you all take turns, or else I'm going to have to round robin this if you can't control yourselves. So
we can't control
I kindly ask.
I get to go first then.
What was Ryan's best argument?
I'm definitely not going to control myself, Sarah. It's definitely not going to happen.
Someone just asked what my best argument for feminism is. Can I answer that?
Say it again.
Increases economic stability for families.
Yeah, but anything else could increase economic
stability. But hang on, Ryan. Isn't it the case that you could have a nation that had no feminism that just increased their migrant population, and that also would increase their GDP?
Yeah, it's not peculiar.
I'm not talking about just GDP. I'm talking about individual families, not like the way they engage with the at a.
You could offset you could offset the exact same thing with just immigrant labor.
You can do that with sex slavery.
What I brought up, which is
you can do that with sex trafficking, dude.
And you would have massively unstable.
Okay. Well, let's talk about emotional stability. Do you think that mental illness is rising or decreasing in women?
I'm assuming you're going to tell me that it's rising.
What do you think, Ryan? Do you think it is? Yeah, you suspect it is. I don't understand. I thought that I was supposed to increase emotional stability.
Well, part of that rise, in all fairness,
if we're comparing a family
due to over medication.
If we're comparing a family that has restrictions preventing them from separating if it's a disaster, right? A disaster marriage. And we're comparing that family to one where they can leave and they can marry other people.
Yeah.
Then which one do you think is going to have more emotionally stable?
Actually, this is great that you bring this up. So I have data on this, which I'll send you right now if you'd like. The truth is that if we can do a comparative data going back to when or before there was no fault divorce for show cause divorce. 95% of couples stayed married. Isn't that interesting? Now they do not after you have no cause divorce, right? You have no cause divorce, which was an offset of feminism. Now, the thing is that the index of people who claim that they were happy,
no fault divorce, right?
No fault. Sorry, but that is no cause, right? You don't have to show cause. That's what no fault divorce really is.
Yeah, they don't have to justify it to you, basically.
Yeah, they don't have to justify it. Yeah, well, they don't have to justify it to anybody, not even their kids.
Exactly.
So the thing is or their kids. So anyway, so the point is that we can do a comparative analysis to just in the 40s, 50s, even into the 60s of what the happiness rating of those women was, at least by the self-reported data that they gave us. And we can see that it was much higher. Mental illness was much lower, even though they were stuck in these marriages that were supposedly awful, right? Their happiness index was still higher. Why do you think that is, Ryan?
Your assumption of causation there is false.
I'm asking Ryan a question.
Yeah, sure, but I mean that as well. But like I would say that I'm sorry, Powder said one of the things I was going to say, and I lost the other part. The fact that do you think that the way that we diagnose these things has improved over that same time? Like, do you think that we're better at identifying mental illnesses?
I would absolutely.
Or do you think it's the same?
No, I think absolutely. You've become extremely good at making up new mental illnesses.
Wait, Ryan, are you saying that data is compromised?
No, Ryan, hang on. Let's finish the exchange. It won't be very long. I'll just walk you through this. Here's the entailment of that position, though, Ryan, just so that you know. The entailment would be that they were just as mentally ill then as they are now. Yet, why were they happier, Ryan?
Based on those happiness surveys? Are they even the same questions being asked? Are they
Yeah. Why do people try to
send me this link?
I can send you. Yeah, I can send you the link
right now.
I can send you the link. Sure.
Stay all night. We could.
I love learning.
The validity of the skinny stats. It's such an easy cop out. Like it's the problem is you're not trying to learn. You want to be right.
I just asked them to show me the data.
Proof because your ego.
Yeah.
So okay. I'm assuming everybody's coming on this panel to learn something and not to be right.
So just hang on. So Ryan. Okay, I'm looking for your Discord, but I'm also going to give you the highlights very quickly. But here's the thing: I think
I don't think I'm friends on my current Discord.
Okay, but I do think it's fundamentally unfair. I do think it's fundamentally unfair for me to try to narrate a study because that's framing. But I am just going to quickly give you the highlights. Studies suggested in the 1960s, women reported much higher levels of happiness than men. Not the case right now. So, by the way, just that alone,
what's the
hang on,
differential?
just that alone, by the way, that the happiness index for women was higher than men in the 60s than it is right now. How would you account for that, Ryan?
I mean, a lot of things have changed.
And that's what I'm asking is for a single thing that you would
right?
account. Yeah, can you tell me what you would account for that with?
I mean, I would never try to boil that down to like a one sentence answer.
Yeah, okay. Can you account for that with fucking anything, Ryan?
3 things.
I mean, we could sit down and explore it. It's a very interesting question.
That's what I'm asking you to do is to fucking explore it. Can you account for it with anything, Ryan?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's right. You fucking idiot. Anyway, okay, so here I'm going to send you the study, and I'll show you the shift in happiness. When do you think the shift in happiness occurred?
It corresponded with the neutralization of gender roles because women are acting like men, and it's out of.
Isn't it fucking wild? It corresponded with the neutralization of gender roles starting in the 70s when it began to shift with the end of the sexual revolution. I'm willing for you to give me a stronger correlate. Ryan, I'm all ears.
I'll let someone else go for now. I'm reading some stuff, so I'll come back.
You keep reading.
Sounds like he's cool.
Yeah, I will.
By the way, Andrew, your chat is so fucking mean to me.
Bro, listen.
Your name is Pickle Master.
Chris, hang on, Pickle Master. I don't mean this to sound bad to you. By the way, my wife, I hope she's watching. She needs to bring me down a shot and another pack of smokes. But I don't mean this to be mean. But you shouldn't have said that because the chat is so they're dude. Like these guys, they give zero fucks. They give zero fucks. They don't even care about me. They don't even fucking like me. They don't even like me, bro.
They made fun of you on your.
But I love you too.
They're so mean.
But look though, Jim Bob. It was one thing that wasn't acknowledged.
Who do you love more, tied up, Jim Bob or Andrew?
It's debatable. If Andrew has a cigarette in his mouth, he looks cooler. But
That's
Jim
true.
Bob, there was one thing that
You
you
like
said.
it sticks in his
He has a
mouth.
better beard. He has a better beard.
I want to acknowledge something that Jim Bob did that I don't think was acknowledged.
Zesty as fuck.
Jim Bob was even granting the young lady who I'm actually gonna find her Instagram and ask her out. She was hot. But Jim Bob was even granting her that certain
Here I was
qualities
thinking you were
within
gay.
females. He was saying, okay, even if certain qualities in females are superiors, just say that. We would still need the men to enforce them to go along with the system anyway.
So enslave women?
So yes, like
I think
for
you need men
example,
and women.
Fucking
to do
base.
no, wait, hold on, don't do that. Hold on, wait. My point is, if we all agree that, don't do that. I'm a rookie. Y'all can probably wait, let me just get this off. If we all agreed hypothetically that the women were superior at something, and we said, yeah, we're going to implement them in the system, the only person that can stop us from following the system is another man.
That's
right.
Can I point out the irony of a black man saying enslave all women?
I got to point to this. Wait.
I know.
There's a few comparison. So say that I'm gonna grab the only thing that stops me from grabbing a woman's ass is another man, right? So as a black
or
man,
some
like
human
Andrew was
decency, right?
saying, I can even admit, even though women are most likely not going to admit, I can even
Okay.
admit that as a black man, we need some white people
Okay,
to
but
agree
can I
with
just
us.
say that for Ryan's hang on. From Ryan's perspective, though, the only thing that's preventing him from grabbing a man's cock is another man, too, right? So,
or the fact that I don't want to sexually assault people, right? But
Oh,
if I had their consent, then I
you
wanted
go.
to, then I would, right? And you would have a problem with it.
I'm excited to see where this conversation
Ryan
is going.
offended him with Ryan's voice doesn't help. I'm sorry, no offense, Ryan. Your voice doesn't help. It makes it funnier.
I don't.
I'm sorry, dog. But anyway, I respect your intent though. Like, and I have respect for you, even though we don't agree.
Hang on.
But
doesn't seem like it, but yeah.
okay, I'm
Cheers,
sorry.
hang on to the whole panel. Cheers to you guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'm tied up. That's why I'm arguing for a patriarchy. Even in your own community, if you want to call it that, the absence of a
Throw a
father,
cherry in
which
there
is
for me.
predominant.
Throw a cherry
It's
in
the
there,
same
woman.
argument, right? That you need another man to be always sort of lingering to sort of check other men, and women are not really in that game. Where they're just included in the cross.
Wow, so a man wants to see a system where
so
he's the center of
undeniable.
attention?
Melanie, shut the fuck up. No one
Oh,
cares
wow, we
about a
should be
lady.
more
No one
penis
cares about
centric.
your lady dick. Okay, you have no authority here.
Self-serving,
I was
self-righteous
talking to
asshole.
Tied Up. Listen, get out of here, mutant. Tied Up.
Shut the fuck up, man child.
Shut up. You have no
Shut the fuck up, you
arguments.
little man
Get out
child.
of here. Chop
You
it off
angry little
already.
bitch boy.
Chop it.
You're just an
I'm
angry
not
little
gonna
bitch
do it.
boy.
Is your name Melania? Is your name
I thought
Melanie?
Crucible fans don't give a fuck, Andrew. What the
Chop
fuck is
it,
this little bitch
Melvin.
boy doing here representing
Listen,
you?
Melvin, keep quiet or
Dude,
make
I'm
an argument.
confused as hell. So he's a regular or something? He's like one of them gay guys?
He's a regular. Yeah, he's a regular.
Yeah,
Okay,
Jim Bob is regularly
Watch,
triggered
watch,
by
make
me.
an argument.
You're-
Watch this.
Jim
Watch
Bob,
this. Make
Jim
an
Bob,
argument.
you're regularly triggered
Hey,
by
make
me.
an
That's my
argument.
argument.
Make an
No,
argument,
cool,
Melanie.
cool, that's
Yeah,
fine.
so-
I'm just want to go ahead and speak your piece.
So
No, make an argument.
I could only expect the
Okay,
patriarchy
dick.
to be
Okay,
supported
dick lady.
by a bunch of insecure men who
Oh,
only want to control women.
You know what, let him
Because,
speak.
the
Let him-
la-
let him-
because
let him
all you
speak
really
his
are,
own
all
Hey,
you
hold
really
on,
are,
Not an argument.
is
Just
afraid
for an
of
argument.
female empowerment.
Fuck
Hang on, calm down.
on.
Calm
Ask for an
down.
argument, not a
Hang on, chill.
psychology.
Guys,
Yes.
guys,
Hold on.
chill out,
Hold
chill
on.
out, chill out.
Thank you,
Me-
Andrew.
Now, so Melanie,
Hold on. I need to make a
Fucking
point
dick
here.
lady.
Tied
Do-
up. Tied up. Can you please like back out of conversations? Like if two people are having an argument, you throwing random shit in there isn't getting us anywhere. If you could just kind of back out when two people are going at it. Thank you.
yeah,
No one's
hey,
gonna stop
Melanie,
you.
I'm
Melanie,
getting out of here now, Sarah. So I'll.
hang on,
I'll
hang
see you
on.
guys
Jake,
all
don't go
later.
anywhere until this comment is done. Melanie, do you think it's insecure
Okay.
to cut your penis off if you're a man in order to be a woman? Don't
I
you
think
think
it takes a
that's
lot of
pretty
bravery.
insecure?
I think it takes a lot of
It's
bravery.
bravery to chop your dick
Yeah.
off. That's
I
hilarious.
don't know. It seems like it's very insecure to me. Just
Are
say
you brave enough to do it? Are you brave enough to do
To
it?
make that decision, you'd have
So
to like have
brave.
a lot of conviction, right?
Just
Like,
holding
to
the
that
dick
point.
in your hand, I'm like, it's so brave.
Now you can leave, Jake. Have a wonderful evening. By the way,
Thanks,
I'll
Jake.
see you later for N1SB.
All right,
So
I'll see
I
you,
did some
Andrew.
reading
Bye.
about it, and I just wanted to like see
Australia.
like what people say, like what experts say about this, like what people who study it talk about, and it kind of aligns with what my intuitions were. Which, of course, while feminism has empowered women with greater freedom, rights, and self-expression, obviously also introduces new pressures, higher expectations, and new environments, right? And role ambiguity, which contributes to stress and dissatisfaction. But
What does
by
role?
and
Wait,
large,
wait. What does role
what?
ambiguity mean? What does role ambiguity
Yeah, what
mean?
the fuck are you saying?
it
Hang on,
means-
hang on. What does role
yeah.
ambiguity mean?
Well, it would mean that like comparing like right now somebody's perspective of what it means to be a man or a woman compared to where your very rigid gender roles.
So traditional. So ambiguity towards traditional gender roles. That's really weird. And that's almost like exactly what I said would be the deciding factor when I said when there became ambiguity in gender roles is when the happiness began to shift. Ryan, that's so weird, Ryan.
So you're correct about that part of the analysis, right? Like that. Yeah. Okay. And.
So
it seems like if we wanted to have happiness increase, a prescriptive would be to go back towards truth. What? Ryan.
Well, what I would focus on is autonomy, right? Not people's individual like happiness.
Well, that's really weird because hang on, women are more autonomous now than they've ever been, and they're the least happy that they've ever been since we've been collecting happiness data. And now you just point out that one of the main reasons for this is the ambiguity for gender roles. So Ryan, an easy way it seems like might fix this happiness problem would be to have less ambiguity around what thing.
Since when did your opinion become true?
Ryan, less ambiguity around what thing, Ryan?
Do you agree that would be bad for a lot of people?
Can you answer my question, Ryan? Then I'll answer yours.
It'd be good for more
the ambiguity around gender roles.
Yes, less ambiguity around gender roles. Isn't that interesting, Ryan? Okay, now what question did you have?
Yes. When you have a simpler system can be easier to work within, right? You can find like happiness in a very simple system, but like we don't live in that simple world, right? Things are much more complicated now than they were 60 years ago.
Yeah, because what happens is you create complexities where complexities don't actually exist.
Right, you make up shit.
And so what happens is it's actually your view which is leading to this unhappiness with the ambiguity in gender roles, which is something Ryan advocates, not something Andrew Wilson advocates, and yet you say you're the champion of women. And yet here,
I never said that.
Oh, so you don't champion women's rights?
Toxic masculinity hurts men.
I support feminism.
Okay, great. So then you champion women's rights. So then the idea here, if you champion women's rights, and you champion their rights because you think it'll be better for them and make them more happy, it seems like you have a contradiction in terms here.
Well, I mean, I would support
Ryan,
the right of women
before
to
you answer, if you don't mind, just a logistics piece. Jake has left, and I'm going to disconnect his channel now. Hold on, buckle up, folks. If you're watching from Jake's end, you will be raiding into Jim Bob's show. So if you're not already going to go there, just
what do you mean raiding into Jim Bob? They're not raiding into my show?
No, you don't need
and subscribe to the Powder Dusty.
You don't need anyone.
Dude. You fucking
worthless to the Powder Dusty.
All the shit I do for you, and you get the fucking raid, you fucking dirty.
That's right. That's right.
Subscribe